She went into the darkness to end her life. She wanted to escape the hell of her reality, but she found something far worse waiting for her. Won-hyeok, the boy she once rejected, is now a man covered in fresh blood. He didn't save her to set her free. He saved her to keep her. He locked the door. He sealed their fate. And now, she is trapped in a suffocating bunker with a handsome psychopath who refuses to let her die. This is daytime in the bunker. A distant memory surfaces from a sweltering summer day, buried deep in the past. A young Kim Won-hyeok leads Lee Seo-woo to a concealed bunker, his face shadowed as he promises that their sanctuary is a secret known only to them. He urges her to cast aside her worries, his voice low, intense, and captivating. "Just stay here with me," he implores, gesturing toward the abyssal entrance. As the subterranean air spills out from the bunker and brushes against her skin, a primal instinct takes hold. She turns and flees, her heart pounding, not from the darkness of the depths, but from him. Rain streaks down the windows of the high school. Inside, a group of girls lament the endless, gray monsoon. One looks out at a hulking structure in the distance, a military blast wall, noting how ominous it looms in the storm. They discuss its sudden demolition, one girl whispering a grim rumor. Maybe a tragedy occurred there, so they have to remove it? Another girl shudders, then playfully smacks her friend, joking about restless spirits. Unseen by them, Lee Seo-woo, who appeared to be resting, suddenly jolts at her desk. Her head snaps up, startled by the conversation. A girl recoils from Lee Seo-woo's desk. "Why are you looming behind me?" "You gave me a fright," she complains. Her friends laugh, calling Seo-woo a gloomy phantom and cruelly wondering if such beings feel pain. Seo-woo shrinks in her seat, clutching her stomach. At school, she is treated as an unwanted blemish. Her classmates dismiss her, claiming she is merely acting out for attention. She feels just like the ugly, abandoned blast wall outside, a discarded thing that people despise, something that serves no purpose and only obstructs the view. Lee Seo-woo quietly enters her apartment, announcing her arrival. Her parents, seated on the couch, greet her with icy indifference. Her father remarks that she should have returned later. Suddenly, her cousin, Choi Ji-won, brushes past her aggressively. "Mom, can't you do something about her?" Ji-won complains loudly. She fumes that her room is already cramped and will be unbearable once vacation begins. As her mother tries to reason with her, explaining that no other relatives can take Seo-woo in, Seo-woo silently grips the doorknob and escapes into her room. The door opens, revealing Lee Seo-woo's aunt, her expression etched with concern. She apologizes for the earlier outburst, explaining that Ji-won is simply being sensitive. Seo-woo forces a smile, insisting she is fine. Seeing the strain, her aunt offers a small bag of overnight items, suggesting she stay at a friend's house to escape the household tension. "It breaks my heart to see you walking on eggshells," she admits softly. Seo-woo accepts, but the kind gesture highlights a painful truth. Her aunt assumes she has friends, a sanctuary to run to. The reality is, she is utterly solitary. Lee Seo-woo wanders aimlessly as a heavy downpour begins, soaking her uniform to the bone. She finds herself standing on a desolate overpass, the very place where she heard a soul had once departed the world. She blankly observes that the drop doesn't even look that steep. The thought of bunkers brings back unsettling memories, but she pushes them aside. With the rain coming down too hard and nowhere else to go, she looks over the edge. Her eyes land on a metal bunker door set in the grassy hill below, offering the only available shelter from the raging storm. The heavy door seals the world out, plunging Lee Seo-woo into the bunker's suffocating embrace. The air is thick and humid, clinging to her damp skin as she descends into the quiet abyss. Each step echoes in the silence, a lonely rhythm in the vast emptiness. After finding a washroom and changing into dry clothes, she lies on a dusty sofa. The enclosed space feels strangely intimate as she forces her eyes shut, trying to outrun the darkness both outside and within, whispering a quiet prayer for a better someday. A faint, metallic creak cuts through the warm, still air. Lee Seo-woo jolts awake from the dusty sofa, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. Her eyes widen as she looks toward the staircase. The heavy bunker door, the one she remembers sealing shut, hangs ajar. A sliver of gray light spills into the oppressive darkness. A cold dread washes over her. She is certain she closed it. The door couldn't have opened on its own. A terrifying thought takes hold. Someone else is here. She is not alone. The lights flicker to life, and the air instantly grows thick and hot. Lee Seo-woo's entire body freezes. At the far end of the long, concrete hall, a silhouette emerges from the shadows, stepping forward with purpose. Her heart hammers against her ribs as she recognizes her school's uniform, marred by dark, damp stains. A raw cry tears from her throat as she turns and bolts up the stairs. The heavy metal door slams shut just as her fingers graze the handle, another hand, stained with crimson, gripping it from the other side, sealing her inside with him. The metal door crashes shut, sealing them in darkness and suffocating heat. Trapped on the narrow stairs, Lee Seo-woo feels the warmth radiating from Kim Won-hyeok just behind her, his presence an oppressive weight. Her heart hammers a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She turns slowly, her terrified eyes meeting his cold, vacant stare as she recognizes his battered face. A whispered question hangs in the stifling air. This is the one person everyone warned her away from, the only person she ever dared to approach. Now, she is captive with him. The air grows heavy and warm as Lee Seo-woo looks up at Kim Won-hyeok. His face is marked with bruises, and his shirt is covered in unsettling crimson evidence. He steadies himself against the wall, his intense eyes fixed on hers. He reaches past her, his hand closing around the large steel wheel of the bunker door. With a final, decisive turn, he seals them both inside the suffocating darkness. A chill runs through her. The sight is terrifying, but her fear deepens because she recognizes him, remembering their brief connection from elementary school. Lee Seo-woo's mind drifts back to when she was 10. After losing her parents in a tragedy, she went to live with her aunt, transferring into her cousin Ji-won's class. In a strange new world, she latched onto the only person she knew. She tagged along with Ji-won and her friends, but felt like an outsider, unable to connect through her grief. Then one day, a piercing scream shatters the quiet of her room. She jolts awake, her heart pounding as she rushes to the window. Was that a woman screaming? She thinks, peering down. Below, a solitary boy sits on the steps. From that day on, a strange fascination takes root. Lee Seo-woo finds herself watching the boy next door from her window, his quiet presence easing her own loneliness. She finally asks her cousin Ji-won who he is. Without looking up from her phone, Ji-won names him Kim Won-hyeok. But then, her cousin's tone sharpens. She puts her phone down and warns Seo-woo to stay away from him. The air grows cold as Ji-won explains the chilling reason. His father was responsible for a life fading from this world. Seo-woo freezes, the shocking words echoing in the room. Ji-won reveals the chilling truth. They moved to hide that Won-hyeok's father was responsible for a tragedy. The rumors spread instantly. That screaming woman, she continues, was likely his mother, who was forever changed by the terrible event. Ji-won mutters her annoyance, warning Seo-woo to stay away because everyone at their school despises him. Later, Seo-woo sees this firsthand. She watches as boys scrawl hateful messages on his family's gate before scattering. She stands frozen, staring at the cruel graffiti that brands him an outcast in their world. Kim Won-hyeok scrubs furiously at the hateful graffiti marring his gate when he suddenly freezes, sensing her presence. He turns, and for the first time, his dark, intense eyes lock directly with Lee Seo-woo's. The humid summer air crackles, charged with a sudden warmth that makes her breath catch. "Aren't you going to get lost?" he asks, his voice low and rough. His words are a dismissal, but the connection holds her fast until her cousin's chilling warning echoes in her mind. Her courage shatters. With a final glance, Seo-woo turns and flees. At school, Kim Won-hyeok is an outcast. He forgets his supplies and even his indoor shoes, drawing the scorn of teachers and students alike. But the true reason is a dark shadow that follows him, the unspoken truth of his father's terrible deed. The whispers brand him the son of a criminal. However, Lee Seo-woo sees something else. A glimpse of him sleeping alone at his desk reminds her of the boy on the stairs. A strange heat rises in her chest, an unexpected pull she can't ignore, and the sight bothers her deeply. As her friend's chatter fades down the hall, Lee Seo-woo lingers behind, fumbling with a shoelace she doesn't need to tie. Once she's alone, her gaze drifts to Kim Won-hyeok's classroom. The door is propped open, an unspoken invitation. She recalls the image of him sitting alone at his desk, and an undeniable heat rises in her chest. Compelled by this strange warmth, she cautiously pushes the door open and steps inside, drawn into a place where she feels she doesn't belong. Her heart pounds with a mix of curiosity and unease. A memory surfaces of a younger Lee Seo-woo sweeping an empty classroom, a quiet ache of loneliness in her chest. She wonders if she simply hoped someone would appear. The scene blurs, and she finds herself on the floor, looking up into the concerned eyes of Kim Won-hyeok. He asks if she's all right, his breath coming in ragged pants. The heat from his body is overwhelming. Before she can fully respond, he pulls her into a sudden, tight embrace. A startled gasp escapes her as his arms lock around her, the world dissolving into nothing but his warmth. Panic flares through Lee Seo-woo's chest. She struggles against Kim Won-hyeok's surprisingly strong grip, her mind screaming that she needs to get a teacher. But he refuses to release her, his voice a weak, desperate murmur. "No, don't go." A memory floods her senses. It was the first time she had ever been so close to him, close enough to feel his whole body trembling. Instinctively, her hand had moved on its own, reaching out to gently pat his shaking back. The comforting gesture repeats in the present, and she feels the rigid tension in him begin to soften. His small frame trembles against hers, clinging tightly. A sobering thought dawns on Lee Seo-woo as she looks down at him. If she hadn't let him out earlier, something terrible might have happened. He would have been left all alone in that dark place. The realization settles deep within her, a quiet hum of understanding. The reason she was able to approach Kim Won-hyeok that day was simple. In him, she saw a kindred spirit, another child living in the shadows, just like her. He clutches her shirt, seeking comfort in her presence. The classroom is silent. A memory surfaces of Lee Seo-woo cautiously approaching Kim Won-hyeok from behind. Her hand hovers for a moment before she gently pats his shoulder, a small, tentative gesture of comfort. The air crackles with a strange heat at the contact. She softly calls his name, Won-hyeok. As if her voice breaks a spell, he suddenly lurches forward, collapsing onto a pillow in a feverish sleep. The memory sharpens, an empty desk where he should be. He had been absent from school for 3 whole days. Lee Seo-woo's thoughts drift to Kim Won-hyeok. She wonders why he has been absent from school, a quiet concern growing. Is he still unwell? Later, she finds him crouched by a gate, trying to scrub something off the metal bars. The moment he spots her, he jolts to his feet and turns to flee, dropping the cloth he was using. A heavy silence fills the space between them. Seo-woo watches, confused, as he seems to run from her again. "Won-hyeok," she calls out. He stops. She holds up a small eraser, offering a solution. "This works better." Lee Seo-woo places the small eraser on the pillars separating them. The air grows warm, charged with unspoken words. "I'll lend it to you," she says, her voice soft. She tells him to simply give it back at school tomorrow, a clear excuse to see him again. Kim Won-hyeok just watches her, his dark eyes wide with surprise. After she turns to leave, he darts forward, snatching the eraser from its perch. He clutches it tightly, a tangible connection held in his palm. The small promise works. Kim Won-hyeok comes to school the very next day. Lee Seo-woo remembers how he became her shadow after that. Around her, Kim Won-hyeok's prickly defenses simply vanished. They begin to spend their days together on the very stairs where she used to watch him from above, his gaze now fixed on her instead of the concrete. But that warmth was short-lived. A terrible incident suddenly shatters their fragile connection, staining everything crimson. In the present, she faces the truth. She abandoned Ju Won-hyeok, the son of a man who committed an awful act, and she simply ran away. Kim Won-hyeok rises, his body a solid barrier between her and the exit. "Don't go out," he pleads, the words echoing a distant memory of her holding him, of a shared, fragile moment. Lee Seo-woo trembles, confused by the sudden overlap of past and present. Her phone slips from her grasp, clattering down the metal steps. In a flash, he pulls her away from the exit, his grip firm. The heat from his body envelopes her as he insists it's dangerous. His gaze is intense as he orders her back downstairs. Lee Seo-woo's mind races with questions. Why can't she go out? How did he end up like this? Her gaze drifts to his stained hands, a chilling realization dawning on her. Could it be him? He takes a deliberate step down towards her, then another, his presence filling the narrow space. The air crackles with unspoken heat. She sees the confusion clouding his face and understands his fragile state. If her hunch is right, provoking the boy she abandoned could be a grave mistake. She holds her breath, deciding to obey. A memory flashes in Lee Seo-woo's mind, sparking a desperate plan. She remembers them as children and decides to act just as she did back then, hoping it will calm him. Her gaze darts to the open hatch, her only chance. She turns, the air growing warm and heavy. Her hand shoots out, closing around Kim Won-hyeok's arm. He flinches at the sudden touch. "You're hurt," she says, her voice soft as she inspects the severe wound. She suggests she find first aid supplies while he cleans up, praying he believes her concern is genuine. Kim Won-hyeok slaps her hand away. Her feigned concern was too unnatural, and he saw right through it. His voice is a low command. "Move." He reminds her that she's the one who suggested he clean up. Before Seo-woo can process his words, he corners her, his body pressing her back against the bathroom door. The air grows thick and hot, her pulse thrumming in her ears. He leans in, his presence overwhelming, only to turn the handle. "It's raining," he says quietly. "Don't go out." The door clicks shut, leaving her alone in the tense silence. Left alone in the heavy silence, Seo-woo's heart hammers against her ribs. The warmth from their close proximity lingers, clouding her thoughts. She wonders why he would go along with her plans so easily, yet tell her not to leave. Shaking off the confusion, her resolve hardens. Regardless of his motives, she has to get out. As the sound of running water echoes from the bathroom, she knows this is her chance. She tiptoes down the stairs, determined to grab her phone and run, her hands searching the floor where she's sure it fell. A sharp knock echoes from the bathroom door, freezing Seo-woo in her tracks. Kim Won-hyeok's voice cuts through the sound of the running water, calling her name. Her heart leaps into her throat. She glances back, wide-eyed, her escape plan shattering in an instant. The silence stretches, heavy and threatening. From behind the closed door, his voice darkens. "If you don't answer." Inside the steamy room, he grips the sink, water dripping from his dark hair. He asks accusingly if she was really planning on leaving just like that. Kim Won-hyeok's voice echoes from the other room, calling Seo-woo's name with a chilling warning. He asks if he should come out if she doesn't answer. Her breath catches, heart hammering in her chest as she wonders if he's just testing her. A sudden splash breaks the silence, a calculated sound that makes her flinch. Realizing he did it on purpose, she scrambles to her feet, shouting that she's there. The air grows thick and still as he calmly instructs her to bring him a towel, his voice a command she cannot refuse. A sudden warmth rushes through Seo-woo as a horrifying thought flashes through her mind. She realizes she cannot be alone with him here. Panic ignites, and she abandons the towel, scrambling up the cold metal stairs toward the main hatch. Her heart hammers against her ribs, a frantic rhythm in the stifling silence of the bunker. She grabs the heavy steel wheel, pulling with all her might. Why won't it open? Her hands slip on the unmoving metal, her breath catching as the crushing reality of her confinement settles in. Desperate, Seo-woo pulls on the unmoving wheel, wondering if the old hatch is simply broken. A soft dripping sound from below snags her attention. She freezes, turning just as Kim Won-hyeok steps into view from the other room. Water slicks his skin, he's bare-chested. The air grows heavy, charged and warm. He looks up at her, his voice steady as he says he thought it would be faster to get the towel himself. A sudden heat floods her face as her mind screams that he isn't wearing a shirt. Seo-woo's face burns, her mind reeling. Why did he have to appear like that? She feels completely frozen on the steps, unable to move as she thinks this isn't the person she remembers. A shadow falls over her as Kim Won-hyeok closes the distance from behind. His warm hand gently covers hers on the cold steel wheel. He leans in close, his voice a low whisper right by her ear, confirming her fear. It won't open. A shudder runs through her as she realizes he was right there the entire time. Kim Won-hyeok corners her against the metal stairs, his body radiating a suffocating warmth. He leans in, his voice a low murmur against her ear, reminding her that he warned her about the dangerous steps. Her breath catches. A single drop of water falls from his hair, landing on her cheek. Flustered, she stammers a question about the towel he needed. He simply says, "Yeah," his intense gaze lingering for a moment longer. Then he turns, his footsteps echoing as he walks away, leaving her frozen and speechless on the cold stairs. The suffocating warmth of his presence finally recedes, and Seo-woo catches her breath. He's gone. Her gaze drifts down the cold metal stairs and freezes on a familiar object resting on the concrete below. Her phone? How? Before she can process the sight, Kim Won-hyeok's voice cuts through the silence. He stands in a doorway, his bare torso still damp as he dries his hair. He asks why she's still up there. Flustered, she starts down the steps. Just as he opens another door, he stops and turns. There's something I should tell you. His words hang heavy in the air. Lee Seo-woo's gaze drifts to the massive, sealed door, their only way out. As he casually dries his hair, Kim Won-hyeok explains that it probably won't open. It locks if shut too hard, he says, his voice unnervingly calm as he tells her not to waste her energy. The air grows thick, charged with the warmth radiating from him and the chilling finality of his statement. A cold dread washes over her as her heart hammers against her ribs. He knew all along. Her hand darts out, snatching the phone from the concrete. A sudden image of Kim Won-hyeok flashes through her mind. He stands in the washroom, his bare back tense as he methodically wrings a white shirt in the sink, watching the dark crimson stains cloud the water around his hands. Lee Seo-woo's own hands tremble as she stares at the screen, her heart hammering. Why isn't it working? She thinks desperately, but there is no signal. No escape. The last glimmer of hope fades as the battery icon blinks at a dismal 5%. The grim reality crashes down on her. An underground bunker. Her mind races, panic setting in. No signal, no one to call, no one to find her. She stands alone and small in the vast, desolate hallway, truly trapped. A memory flashes, Kim Won-hyeok, his shirt stained, leading her into this very place. From the floor, she whispers his name, her voice a mix of fear and defiance. What are you thinking, locking me in here? In an instant, his hand closes around her arm, the sudden warmth sending a jolt through her entire body. The air in the grimy washroom feels thick and heavy. Kim Won-hyeok stands with his back to her, shirtless, a towel draped over one shoulder. Water runs from the faucet as he meticulously cleans a small folding tool, his focus absolute. A weary sigh escapes his lips, the sound swallowed by the small space. With a sharp, metallic click, he snaps the object shut, the sound echoing off the tiles. He slips the now-clean tool into his pocket, the heat from his body seeming to radiate through the room as he turns his intense gaze. A memory flashes through Lee Seo-woo's mind, hot and sharp. Years ago, a younger Kim Won-hyeok stands alone by a cold metal gate, head bowed and face scuffed. From behind a brick wall, she peeks out, her eyes wide. After a moment of heavy silence, she clutches her backpack strap, turns, and walks away, leaving him behind. The question echoes in the present darkness. Did you betray me? The chilling realization dawns. He locked her in here on purpose. It must be because she abandoned him all those years ago. The heat in the bunker seems to rise as Lee Seo-woo's mind races. This is his revenge, but the door is broken. A figure emerges from the bathroom, and her breath catches. Kim Won-hyeok stands there, drying his hair with a towel. He explains that the door locks if shut hard and tells her not to waste her energy. Her gaze narrows. She asks him how long he has been coming to this place. A few years, he replies calmly. A sudden, sharp realization cuts through her fear. He's been in this situation before. He must know how to open it. Their footsteps echo in the heavy silence as they walk down the long, concrete hall. A strange warmth seems to radiate from Kim Won-hyeok beside her. He tells her there's nothing to see, and she quickly claims she just doesn't know her way around. Her heart hammers against her ribs. She decides her only chance is to act like she used to in the old days. Her steps halt before a single door painted a different color. That's locked, he says, his voice flat. She stares at it, wondering why this one room is special. Kim Won-hyeok flips a switch, and the room floods with harsh, fluorescent light. Lee Seo-woo's eyes widen in disbelief as the details come into focus. It's a fully stocked infirmary. He leads her inside and sits on an examination table, the wheels of a medical cart rattling as he pulls out supplies. The air between them feels heavy and warm as she watches him expertly wrap a clean bandage around his forearm. She sits stiffly beside him, her own heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, her mind racing with a singular, desperate goal. The air in the sterile room feels warm and heavy. Does it hurt? Lee Seo-woo asks, her voice barely a whisper. This is her chance. A show of concern might just work. When her questions about his injury are met with a tense silence, his hand tightening on the gauze, she quickly changes her approach. It must be hard to do that by yourself, she says, her heart pounding as she offers. Let me help. Kim Won-hyeok's dark eyes meet hers, his expression unreadable. Forget it, he finally says. You'll get crimson on you. Lee Seo-woo realizes he's been sensitive about the fluids. She changes tactics, standing to move toward the medical cart. The bandage is long, she offers, I'll give you scissors." Before she takes a step, Kim Won-hyeok's hand shoots out, his warm grip closing firmly around her bare foot. A current of heat rushes through her, and she freezes, her breath catching in her throat. His dark eyes are locked on the sole of her foot. "You have glass stuck in your foot," he murmurs, his voice low in the silent room. Lee Seo-woo's heart thumps in her chest. She hadn't even realized she was injured. "Stay still," Kim Won-hyeok commands, his voice low and steady. "It'll just get worse." His grip is firm as he carefully extracts the shard of glass from the sole of her foot. A soft gasp escapes her lips. His dark eyes meet hers for a moment before he gently applies a bandage. The unexpected tenderness of his touch sends a jolt through her, and she flinches, heat rising in her cheeks. Without another word, he abruptly stands and turns to leave. "I'm going to my room first," Lee Seo-woo says quietly, asking if he plans to sleep. Without waiting for a response, she turns and hurries away. Kim Won-hyeok remains seated, his gaze following her as his hands rest calmly in his lap. Later, in the dim light of the bunker, sleep won't come. Lee Seo-woo tosses and turns on the small couch, the silence heavy and suffocating. Her heart pounds in her chest as she cautiously peeks over at Kim Won-hyeok's still form on another cot. She holds her breath, wondering if he's awake. Lying on the couch, Lee Seo-woo's mind churns. The image of Kim Won-hyeok's surprisingly gentle touch as he bandaged her foot flashes in her thoughts. She was so sure he resented her, but now she has no idea what he's thinking. The tension of the day finally gives way to a heavy exhaustion, and her eyelids begin to droop. She fights it, knowing she can't sleep, not while she's so vulnerable. But the pull is too strong. She drifts into unconsciousness, completely unaware of Kim Won-hyeok standing silently over her in the dim light. In the heavy silence, Kim Won-hyeok moves from his cot, sinking to the floor beside the couch where Lee Seo-woo is fast asleep. He watches her still form, his gaze lingering on her face before dropping to her hand, which dangles loosely over the edge. He reaches out, his fingers tentatively brushing against hers. A quiet warmth spreads through the space between them as he gently takes her hand in his. "Still here," he thinks, his eyes tracing the lines of her sleeping face. "You haven't changed." The air thickens, charged with an unspoken history. A memory flashes, hot and suffocating. Against a stark, crimson background, a woman's hands grip young Kim Won-hyeok's shoulders. His eyes are wide with shock as he looks up at her dark silhouette. She whispers that he looks just like his father. Her grip tightens, a chilling pressure that sends a tremor through him. "So if you start acting like him, too." Her voice trails off, leaving a terrible, unspoken threat hanging in the heavy air. The promise of what she will do lingers, searing itself into his mind. Kim Won-hyeok jolts back to the present, gasping for air, the phantom pressure of the memory clinging to his throat. He pants heavily, hovering over Lee Seo-woo as she sleeps peacefully on the cot. A wave of exhaustion washes over him, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. He gently lowers himself beside her, the small space instantly warming with his presence. His ragged breathing begins to quiet, finding a fragile rhythm with hers in the suffocating stillness of the bunker. Their heartbeats a silent conversation in the dark. The quiet rhythm of Lee Seo-woo's breathing is the only sound in the bunker. Kim Won-hyeok sits up from the floor, his hand resting on his throat as he watches her sleep. He rises carefully, the warmth of his presence lingering in the small space as he moves with a stealthy grace. He reaches for a bag on a nearby crate, but his fingers fumble. The contents spill across the floor with a sudden clatter, shattering the stillness. He freezes, staring down at the mess, the fragile piece of the moment broken. Kim Won-hyeok kneels silently, his shadow falling over Lee Seo-woo as she sleeps on the cot. On a nearby crate, among the spilled provisions, rest two small, dark packets. Time stretches on, marked only by the muffled sound of heavy rain drumming against a small, streaked window. Lee Seo-woo stirs restlessly, tossing under the thin blanket. Her eyes flutter open with a pained groan, her hand immediately pressing against her forehead as she slowly awakens to the claustrophobic morning. "Ah, damn it," she whispers, her voice rough with sleep and discomfort. A small plate appears before Lee Seo-woo, placed there by Kim Won-hyeok. The unexpected warmth of the gesture pulls her into a rain-soaked memory. He finds her on the steps, his presence a quiet comfort, a stark contrast to her home where her mother is already packing her a bag. She has a friend's place to stay anyway, her mother insists. Her sisters protest. She hasn't even said she's leaving. Echoes in her mind. Here, in the bunker's stifling heat, his silent care feels more welcoming than the home she left behind. The memory continues, her mother's voice bustling with false concern as she packs a bag for Seo-woo's stay at a friend's place. Her sister observes from her desk, the truth heavy in her thoughts. Their mother just prefers it when she's gone. She quietly adds a few personal items to the bag. A flicker of guilt crosses the sister's face. She knows their mother would forbid this trip if she knew the truth. If she knew Seo-woo was going to see someone else entirely. The image dissolves into a cold, empty stairwell. Seo-woo's sister gazes out the window, worried her sibling might be making a scene. Her mother's words drift back to her. How she sent Seo-woo to Kim Won-hyeok's place just to get her out of the house. Annoyed, she tries to call, but the phone is off. Why now? The timing makes her suspicious. Standing in the pouring rain, she keeps trying the number as she walks into the dark, wet woods. She looks down at her phone, and her eyes widen in sudden shock, her breath catching in her throat. Lee Seo-woo stirs from sleep, murmuring to herself as she slowly sits up on the couch. Is it morning? The question hangs in the stale air. Her eyes snap open, the familiar yet terrifying surroundings coming into focus. She's alone. A sudden, heavy groan of metal turning echoes from above. Her gaze shoots upward to the hatch, her heart starting to pound in her chest. Scrambling to her feet, she reaches a hand toward the sealed exit, a cold dread creeping over her. It's the same, she whispers, her voice trembling. Kim Won-hyeok. Her voice is a fragile whisper, lost in the heavy silence. A sudden warmth floods her veins as a memory flashes before her eyes. A silhouette, unmistakably her own, stands frozen in a brightly lit doorway before whipping around. Suddenly, she is running. Her shadow streams across the floor of a dark storage room, feet pounding a frantic rhythm against the concrete. The memory is a breathless, desperate chase through the past, echoing the suffocating beat of her heart in the present, a rhythm that seems to call out his name. With a sudden shove, the heavy doors swing open. Lee Seo-woo steps into a brighter, yet equally deserted room. A strange heat pulses through her, an anxious thrum in her veins. He isn't here either. Her gaze falls upon a vast, cavernous hallway stretching into the oppressive darkness. Standing at the threshold, a small figure against the immense emptiness, she wonders aloud where he could have gone. Her own heartbeat hammers against the quiet, a frantic search for another in the suffocating silence. At the breakfast table, a young woman's father asks if she had trouble sleeping. She quietly admits she did. Her mother, however, remarks that she slept wonderfully, adding it must be because that moody kid isn't moping around the house anymore. She suggests telling Choi Ji-won to stay at her friend's place more often. With a clatter, Choi Ji-won puts her chopsticks down. Her appetite is gone. As she gets up to leave for school, her mother calls out, offering to make her favorite dinner and warning her about the heavy rain. The front door thuds shut. The steady rhythm of rain fills the air as Lee Seo-woo walks down a deserted street, her expression grim. She glances at a large gated building before continuing on her way, the city a blur of gray around her. Later, inside the dim bunker, she sits huddled on a couch, hugging her knees to her chest. A chilling realization washes over her. Kim Won-hyeok is gone. Did he leave me? She wonders, her heart pounding. But the door is still broken. A new wave of despair hits her as she confirms her phone has no signal. She's trapped, alone. A flicker of hope warms Lee Seo-woo. Her neighborhood is just outside. Surely, once her family or friends realize she's missing, they will find her. But the warmth vanishes, replaced by an icy memory of being invisible, a ghost in her own life. They acted like she wasn't even there. The crushing realization settles in the thick, still air of the bunker. Who would even bother looking? A new, desperate heat pulses through her. Her survival hinges on one person. A single, terrifying thought takes root. What if Kim Won-hyeok doesn't come back? The crushing silence presses down on Lee Seo-woo, pulling up ghosts of lonely days. Alone, the word echoes in the dark. Suddenly, a soft dripping cuts through the quiet. Her head snaps up. Kim Won-hyeok stands near the entrance, soaked from the rain and holding a cardboard box. A dizzying warmth rushes through her, chasing away the icy dread. Her heart, once pounding with fear, now thrums with a different rhythm as his name escapes her lips. Ju Won-hyeok. He just watches her, his dark eyes intense, the air between them growing thick. The cardboard box hits the floor with a heavy thud. Before Lee Seo-woo can react, Kim Won-hyeok closes the distance between them. He gently presses his palm against her forehead, his touch sending a jolt of heat through her. Her breath catches, her wide, startled eyes locking onto his. "You don't have a fever," he murmurs, his voice a low rumble. In one swift motion, he pulls her into a sudden embrace, holding her securely against his chest. The world around them dissolves, shifting to a sunlit classroom as a teacher announces the start of homeroom. The teacher looks out at her students, her gaze settling on an empty desk. "Is Seo-woo still not here?" she asks the quiet classroom. Thinking for a moment, she turns her attention to another girl. "Ji-won, do you know why Seo-woo isn't here?" Whispers immediately ripple through the rows as students murmur about the connection. How Ji-won is Seo-woo's cousin but acts like a complete stranger at school. Ji-won replies coolly, not meeting the teacher's eyes. "I don't know either." Resigned, the teacher decides to make a call herself. The teacher ends the call with a sharp click. In the rows of desks, two students whisper to each other. "Hey, you know that guy in the class next door?" One murmurs, referring to the son of a man who took another's life. He notes the boy is absent again today. The other student finds it strange. "Isn't it weird that Lee Seo-woo is missing on the exact same day?" he asks with a laugh. He hints at a shared history from their elementary school days. The scene dissolves into a gray, rainy day, focusing on an isolated building. Inside, Lee Seo-woo lies still on a worn-out couch. Lee Seo-woo's eyes flutter open, adjusting to the bunker's dim light. She bolts upright, spotting Kim Won-hyeok sitting across the room. "You awake?" he asks. A frantic heat rushes to her cheeks as she sees her shirt is disheveled. His voice remains unervingly steady as he explains she must have done it herself. While her fingers clumsily fasten the buttons, she watches him. A cold dread washes over her, the fear of him leaving again. She realizes with a jolt that the terror of being trapped alone is far worse than being trapped with him. Kim Won-hyeok rises from his crouched position, his voice cutting through the stillness as he asks what she is looking for. Lee Seo-woo murmurs that she's trying to find her things. He turns and pulls a fresh towel and a new toothbrush from a storage box, holding them out to her. A strange, suffocating warmth hangs in the air between them. She clutches the fabric of her uniform, insisting she has her own supplies, even if they carry bad memories. His gaze intensifies. "Don't you hate using that?" he presses, his quiet words landing with heavy implication. A strange warmth spreads from where their fingers brush as Lee Seo-woo takes the new toothbrush and towel. "Thanks," she murmurs, her heart pounding against her ribs. The conflicting signals make her head spin. She looks up at him, her voice trembling with confusion. "Why do you sound like you actually care about me?" she asks. She reminds him that he locked her up for revenge, just like he did in the past. Her gaze intensifies as a new, more urgent question forms. "But then, what is your reason for keeping me locked up now?" For so long, fear has kept Lee Seo-woo silent, too afraid to provoke Kim Won-hyeok with questions about why he stopped her from leaving. But a quiet resolve takes hold as she decides he won't threaten her anymore. Stepping forward, she finally asks the question burning inside her. "Won-hyeok, why did you stop me from leaving back then?" He looks up, his dark eyes meeting hers. The air in the bunker grows heavy and warm, filled with a silent tension as her heart hammers against her ribs, anxiously awaiting his answer. Kim Won-hyeok's gaze remains fixed on the floor as he finally answers, his voice low. He reminds her that the bunker door locks if you slam it shut. Lee Seo-woo's mind races, trying to make sense of his words. Is he claiming this was all an accident? But she searched for him earlier, and he was gone. She's certain he knows a way out. Without warning, he stands, a sudden, fluid motion that erases the distance between them. The air grows thick and heavy. She flinches, her breath catching in her throat. Fear crashes over her as his shadow falls upon her. She immediately regrets questioning him, a wave of panic replacing her momentary courage. The intense heat from his presence makes Lee Seo-woo's skin prickle, and her shoulder trembles under his unwavering gaze. Just as the tension becomes unbearable, he abruptly turns his back and walks away. He tells her he never went outside. Lee Seo-woo stares after him, completely bewildered. "You didn't go out?" she asks, her voice trembling slightly. He reveals he was just getting something to eat, crouching to pull out a stash of canned food. As he offers her one, her mind spins. If he was here the whole time, how did they not cross paths? Lee Seo-woo's suspicion grows. The existence of food in a bunker abandoned for years doesn't add up, and she resolves to investigate the kitchen at the first opportunity. After freshening up, she towels her damp hair dry and walks back into the main area. Kim Won-hyeok sits on the floor against the wall, his head bowed low and a stark white bandage wrapped around his hand. As she quietly approaches, the air thickens. The silence between them is heavy, yet a strange warmth begins to fill the cold space, each soft footstep closing the distance. Lee Seo-woo steps closer, her breath held tight. She wonders if he's asleep, his head bowed in such an awkward way. As she leans in, his dark eyes suddenly meet hers, catching her completely off guard. The space between them vanishes, and the air becomes charged, warm and electric, making her heart hammer against her ribs. He seems to drift off again, and a new resolve forms within her. This is her chance. Quietly, she moves past him, intent on uncovering the truth about their mysterious food supply. As Lee Seo-woo moves to slip past him, Kim Won-hyeok is swallowed by a dark memory. Fragmented voices warn him not to be like his father and command him to forget if he wants to live. He shudders violently, jolted back to the present. His trembling hand darts out, his fingers desperately clutching the fabric of her shirt, stopping her in her tracks. The heat from his touch radiates through the thin material, a stark contrast to the bunker's chill. His voice, barely a whisper, breaks the silence. Lee Seo-woo? Lee Seo-woo stands among the dusty supply shelves, her eyes scanning the rations. She picks up a can, turning it over to check the bottom. The date is ancient. It expired years ago. Her mind races, recalling the fresh food Kim Won-hyeok had given her. The contradiction makes her unsteady, and a can slips from her grasp, clattering across the concrete. She follows its path as it rolls to a stop. Did he really go outside? Her gaze drifts to the sealed, broken bunker door. It's impossible. A chilling question forms in the silence. Just how did he get out? A memory of Kim Won-hyeok surfaces, his voice mentioning a locked place, the blue room. A spark of hope ignites in Lee Seo-woo. What if it's another way out? The thought connects to his wet shoes upon his return. Could there be water beyond this door? She presses her ear to the cold metal, her heart beating a frantic rhythm of fear and anticipation. A strange warmth spreads through her as she strains to listen. Suddenly, a heavy clunk echoes from the other side, and her eyes fly wide with shock. Her heart hammers against her ribs. No, the sound didn't come from the door she was touching. Her gaze snaps upward, following the echo to its source, a massive, circular vault door embedded deep in the shadows of the bunker. A jolt of pure adrenaline courses through her, a wave of heat washing away her fear. The question of who might be on the other side is instantly erased by a singular, blinding hope. She scrambles to pull on a pair of shoes. Her mind latches onto one thought. It doesn't matter who it is. She can get out. A tear of relief escapes Lee Seo-woo's eye as she rushes for the stairs. Freedom is so close. But before she takes another step, a hand clamps onto her arm, yanking her backward. She crashes against Kim Won-hyeok's chest, his arms wrapping around her in a desperate embrace. The heat from his body is immediate, a suffocating warmth. His hand covers her mouth as he presses his face into her shoulder, his voice a broken whisper filled with anguish. He pleads with her, "Don't go out." Her hope evaporates into the heavy air. An unnerving warmth radiates from Kim Won-hyeok as he pulls Lee Seo-woo tightly against him. He buries his face in her shoulder, his voice a desperate, feverish whisper as he begs her not to go outside. Seo-woo's breath catches, her entire body freezing in place. She stares wide-eyed, unable to move. Realizing this is a whole different level of intensity. His raw desperation feels like a physical weight, pressing down on her. The name Kim Won-hyeok echoes in her mind, a frantic drumbeat of confusion and alarm. The cold truth settles in her heart. Kim Won-hyeok has no intention of letting her go. Hearing a faint sound from outside, a frantic thought screams through her mind. In a desperate move, a sharp crack echoes through the bunker, followed by a sting in her hand. Before a cry can escape her lips, he lunges. His palm, impossibly warm and now marked with crimson, clamps over her mouth. The air grows heavy and hot, thick with his proximity as he completely silences her plea for help. Kim Won-hyeok's eyes burn with a dark intensity, his injured fingers held near her face. He grips Lee Seo-woo's jaw, his voice a low, cold command to spit out everything in her mouth. "Hurry," he insists, A wave of shock ripples through Seo-woo. She wonders if his fury is because she hurt him, realizing with a jolt that she's never seen him this angry. Even trapped in the bunker, he was never this threatening. Her entire body trembles as a single, frightened syllable escapes her lips, a quiet admission of her fear. Her quiet plea, a whisper begging him not to be so scary, shatters the tension. Kim Won-hyeok's rage falters. A memory flashes of a younger Lee Seo-woo, her back turned as she walks away from him, disappearing into the distance. Back in the dim light of the bunker, his touch changes. He gently takes the sharp fragment from her hand and carefully helps her sit down. His voice, now soft and low, promises he won't be scary anymore. All his earlier harshness melts away, replaced by a desperate vulnerability as he adds his only condition: just don't go outside. The air crackles with an unspoken tension. Lee Seo-woo watches Kim Won-hyeok, her heart stammering in her chest. She has only ever seen a blank mask on him inside this place, but the raw emotion now on his face is entirely new. A confusing warmth spreads through her as she wonders why he goes to such extremes, why he keeps reminding her of the past. What is he so afraid of? Suddenly, a loud, metallic sound reverberates from the exit. Seo-woo's head snaps toward the stairs, her eyes widening. A second, final echo sounds, sealing the heavy door shut. The past flashes through Kim Won-hyeok's mind, a memory of Lee Seo-woo walking away from him years before. Back in the stark reality of the bunker, he watches her retreat up the metal stairs. She stops, her voice wavering but determined. "Tell me," she demands, "how did you end up here?" A bitter, knowing smile touches his lips as he questions why she thinks he would tell her anything willingly. Panic flares in her eyes. "If you come any closer, I'll scream," she warns, her threat hanging in the thick air. He ignores her, lunging forward and grabbing the railing right beside her. The space between them evaporates instantly. The heat of their confrontation shifts as Kim Won-hyeok sinks to his knees below her. He admits he ran here to hide from someone who was looking for him, his voice low and urgent. "It might be dangerous if you go out," he warns. A cold realization washes over Lee Seo-woo. She asks if it's his father out there. He quietly confirms it is. The air grows thick with unspoken danger. Her mind races. Is staying with her unstable captor the right choice? She knows that once a decision is made, there is no turning back. Lee Seo-woo remembers her desperate attempt to signal for help, turning the hatch wheel just as a menacing shadow appeared outside. A heavy, metallic clang suddenly echoes through the bunker, sealing them in. The finality of the sound sends a shock through her. She gasps, stumbling back down the stairs and collapsing in a trembling heap. Her mind spirals with fear. She wonders if his father came to bring ruin to his own son, and if she would be caught in the middle. The air feels heavy, and her chest constricts. She can't breathe. As Lee Seo-woo gasps for air, her world shrinking to the cold metal stairs, Kim Won-hyeok moves toward her. He kneels, his presence a sudden, intense warmth in the suffocating space. His hands gently cup her face, stilling her trembling. Their eyes lock, and for a moment, the bunker's chill is replaced by a different kind of heat radiating from his touch. She whispers that he was just like her, a fragile recognition passing between them. Desperate, she then asks if there's another way out, her hope hanging precariously in the silence. A memory drifts into focus, showing two students talking on a grassy hill overlooking a road. One turns to his friend, Ji Sung-chan, asking if his head has healed. He remembers that Ji Sung-chan had to transfer schools after suffering a severe injury during an encounter with someone they knew, the son of a man who committed a terrible act. The student then asks if they still live in the neighborhood, clarifying he means Kim Won-hyeok and Lee Seo-woo. The memory fades to an image of a young Won-hyeok, a calm, unsettling smile on his face. The hum of a vacuum fills a tidy home as a woman cleans the living room. Her phone chimes, interrupting the chore. She answers, her voice casual until she hears the caller is Seo-woo's teacher. Her eyes widen in alarm as she learns her daughter never made it to school. Thinking fast, she stammers an excuse, claiming Seo-woo is sleeping over at a friend's house and must have forgotten to charge her phone. After ending the call, she stands in silence for a moment, then reaches for a framed family photograph on the bookshelf. Her mother holds a framed photograph, her thumb brushing the glass. The image is from a sunnier time. A young, smiling Lee Seo-woo sits nestled between her parents on a park bench. The woman stares at the faces of her daughter and husband, a quiet sadness in her eyes. She thinks to herself how they don't seem to resemble each other in any way. Meanwhile, in the bunker's dim light, Kim Won-hyeok struggles. He jams a screwdriver into an object, but the tool slips with a scrape. He sighs, frustrated. "Can't open it with this," he mutters. Her sneakers crunch softly over the debris as she steps toward an open doorway. Inside, Seo-woo watches as Kim Won-hyeok tends to a darkened bandage on his arm, his back turned to her. The air in the bunker suddenly feels heavy and warm, and her heart beats a frantic rhythm against her ribs. His earlier, chilling mention of his father being outside had stopped her cold. She had to halt him from smashing another door, insisting they find a key instead. Now, as she stands close behind him, the charged silence stretching between them is almost a physical touch. A strange sort of clarity cuts through Seo-woo's fear. She realizes Kim Won-hyeok isn't just a captor. He's hiding from his own father, just like her. A flicker of understanding passes between them without a word. As he tends to the wrapping on his wrist, he sees her in the same light. A girl chased into this darkness, another soul on the run. The stifling warmth of the bunker seems to amplify the silent question hanging in the air. What desperate hope had led her to this very door? Kim Won-hyeok's gaze darkens, his thoughts drifting to Seo-woo's desperate arrival. He questions if she still remembers her reason for coming here. A memory flashes through his mind, sharp and violent, a hand gripping a sharp edge against a crimson haze. He wonders why she is still with him, even after what he did. He turns his head sharply, the image shifting to a crowded school staircase from their past. There, a younger version of himself stands alone, head bowed as other students pass by, completely isolating him in their midst. A teacher questions a student named Ji-won, asking if she knows whose house Seo-woo stayed at. The memory flashes to a school hallway where Seo-woo stops her two friends. "You guys go ahead," she says, dismissing their offer to wait. Confused, they reluctantly leave her behind, watching her stand alone. Back in the present, the teacher explains she already contacted Seo-woo's mother, who only heard her daughter was sleeping at a friend's place. When pressed for details, Ji-won insists firmly that she doesn't know anything. Ji-won cuts the conversation short, telling her teacher she already gave her answer this morning. "I'm going," she announces, turning to leave. But the teacher's voice stops her cold. "It's not Ju Won-hyeok from the class next door, is it?" The question hangs in the air, heavy with suspicion. The teacher adds that Won-hyeok didn't come to school either. A flush of heat rises in Ji-won's cheeks. She looks up, her gaze steady and defiant. It's not his house. As she walks away, her secret feels like a burning weight she must carry alone. The tip of the pen scratches against the concrete as Seo-woo maps out their confines, searching for an escape. She sketches a small ladder, a sliver of an idea. A sudden warmth spreads through her as a hand firmly closes around her arm, stopping her mid-motion. Kim Won-hyeok looms directly behind her, his voice a low whisper that prickles her skin. "What are you doing?" Seo-woo flinches, her heart hammering in her chest. She turns, her eyes wide with shock. "Ju Won-hyeok, you scared me," she stammers, trying to regain her composure. Seo-woo looks at him, her brow furrowed with concern. "But you don't look too good," she says, her voice barely a whisper in the stifling bunker. The shadows under Kim Won-hyeok's eyes seem darker, and his face is pale. He brushes it off, insisting it's just how he looks. Unconvinced, she closes the space between them, the air growing warmer with their proximity. "It's hidden by your hair," she murmurs, reaching a hand toward his face. Her fingers gently lift the dark strands from his forehead, but he recoils instantly, swatting her hand away. Seo-woo stammers an apology, flustered by her own sudden impulse to touch him. But before she can pull away, Kim Won-hyeok's hand darts out, catching hers firmly. A dark thought surfaces in his mind, a sharp warning that letting her get close will only give her a dangerous hope for tomorrow. He ignores it. Instead, he pulls her forward, closing the space between them until the air grows thick and warm. He looks down at her, his cheeks flushed and his gaze intense, while Seo-woo stares up, her breath caught in his conflicted eyes. The fluorescent light overhead flickers as Kim Won-hyeok gently takes Seo-woo's wrist. A jolt of unexpected warmth spreads through her as she stares up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. He looks down at her slender wrist, murmuring that it feels like it's going to snap. Confused by his sudden tenderness, Seo-woo suggests he let go if he's that worried. Instead, Won-hyeok changes the subject entirely, asking if she's hungry. He tells her to eat the canned food he brought while he continues searching for the key, leaving her completely bewildered by his gesture. Seo-woo whispers her consent, her mind reeling. Okay. Kim Won-hyeok's fingers slowly uncurl from her wrist. The warmth from his touch lingers on her skin, a strange heat that pulses in the bunker's damp air. He watches silently as she turns and walks away, her small frame navigating the debris-filled corridor. Her steps are hesitant, echoing in the heavy silence. She glances back over her shoulder, but his expression is lost in the shadows. He then turns, his own footsteps carrying him in the opposite direction, leaving a palpable tension between them. In a quiet living room, a family's tense silence shatters. A young woman, Ji-won, lunges across the coffee table, snatching a phone away from her mother. "Were you trying to call her again?" she demands, her voice sharp and accusatory. The mother looks up, startled. From the couch, a man clicks his tongue in annoyance, complaining about how uncomfortable it is watching Seo-woo walk on eggshells. The mother's face clouds with worry. She says Seo-woo has been gone for 2 days. Ji-won insists she stop, asking if she truly believes she doesn't know. Ji-won's voice hardens as a memory flashes through her mind. A somber funeral where a small, grieving Lee Seo-woo clung desperately to her mother's black dress. Back in the present, Ji-won's eyes are intense behind her glasses. "She latched onto you," she accuses, insisting that if her mother had just cut Seo-woo loose back then, she wouldn't have been forced to take such drastic measures. Her mother sits in defeated silence as Ji-won turns to leave, warning her not to call. Outside, she lights a cigarette, sighing in frustration. Seriously, so annoying. As Ji-won stands on the quiet street, a hand suddenly extends a lighter to the cigarette between her lips. A small flame flickers to life, casting a warm glow on her face. She looks up, surprised, into the eyes of a boy in a school uniform standing unexpectedly close. A current passes between them in the charged air as he leans in. "Mine has passed away too," he says softly. Ji-won's brow furrows, annoyed by his forwardness. His intensity breaks as he squints, struggling to remember her. "Huh? You? Choi-ja. Gee, what was it again?" In the dim, quiet room, Lee Seo-woo stirs. Her eyes land on Kim Won-hyeok, finally asleep on the couch. A strange stillness hangs in the air. He's always awake, always watching. But now he's lost in a troubled dream, beads of sweat tracing his skin. A warmth radiates from him, pulling her closer. She kneels by his side, the oppressive heat of the room thickening around them. "Won-hyeok," she whispers, her own hand trembling as she reaches out, her heart pounding with a confusing mix of fear and concern. The oppressive heat seems to radiate from Kim Won-hyeok's sleeping form. Lee Seo-woo's heart hammers against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silence. Her trembling hand closes, fingers twisting into the fabric of his shirt. The warmth from his skin seeps through the thin material, a dangerous current pulling her closer. His name is a silent plea on her lips. In the suffocating darkness of the bunker, she leans in, drawn to the troubled stillness of the boy who holds her captive, the air thick with unspoken fears. A boy in a school uniform confronts a girl holding an umbrella in the rain, his question blunt. "Is your cousin with Ju Won-hyeok right now?" The girl's hand tightens on the handle. "Why should I care?" she asks coldly, insisting they haven't spoken in ages and likely parted on bad terms. The boy smirks slightly, his gaze steady. "I can't speak for Nam Seo-woo," he says, his tone certain, "but I know it wasn't Ju Won-hyeok." His cryptic statement hangs in the air, leaving her stunned and confused. In a hazy memory, Kim Won-hyeok stirs, a name whispered from his lips. The faint sound startles Lee Seo-woo. What was that sound? She wonders, her eyes snapping open. She reaches out, her hand gently touching his forehead. The scene shifts, another boy's voice explaining Won-hyeok's nature. He says that Won-hyeok could never truly end things with her. An image of a desperate embrace surfaces, his arms wrapped tightly around her. The realization dawns with a chilling finality. He must have been holding back this entire time. A heavy groan echoes as the rusted bunker door lifts, revealing Kim Won-hyeok waiting inside. In a vivid memory, Lee Seo-woo sees herself, her eyes wide with shock as he reaches for her hand. The air grows thick as he guides her down the ladder. With a final, resonant thud, the heavy hatch slams shut, plunging them into a shared, suffocating darkness. The The world outside disappears completely, leaving only the two of them trapped in the silence together, the air already feeling warmer, closer. With a grunt of effort, Kim Won-hyeok holds the heavy steel hatch open, his face cast in shadow. He gives one last look down into the darkness below before letting go. The rusted metal groans as it scrapes across the concrete frame, then slams shut with a deep, echoing thud. The world goes black. In the sudden, suffocating heat of the bunker, his intense gaze finds Seo-woo. The air thickens, charged with the frantic, unspoken rhythm of a pounding heart. Escape is no longer an option. A memory flashes against a crimson backdrop. A thought echoes that Kim Won-hyeok could never push Seo-woo away because she was the only one who ever reached out. He would go to any lengths, even if it meant destroying them both. Back in the stifling bunker, Seo-woo whispers his name, her eyes wide as he holds her in his arms. Suddenly, his grip tightens, startling her with its force. A gasp escapes her lips as he pulls her flush against him, burying his face in her shoulder. A powerful, unsettling wave of déjà vu washes over her. Held in Kim Won-hyeok's tight embrace, Seo-woo recalls how he once terrified her. But now, the imposing figure is gone. In his place is someone who feels just like her, vulnerable and lost. A strange empathy rises within her, a feeling that she just can't leave him be. With a gentle, hesitant motion, she lifts her hand and pats his back. Kim Won-hyeok flinches at the unexpected comfort, his body jolting against hers as a quiet warmth spreads through the oppressive heat of the bunker. His intense expression softens, caught off guard by her small act of kindness. The fragile moment shatters. Kim Won-hyeok abruptly pushes Seo-woo away, the sudden force startling her. She lets out a small gasp, looking up at him with wide, confused eyes. He avoids her gaze, his head bowed as he apologizes for the sudden contact, explaining he thought she was trembling. "No, it's fine," she says, her own concern growing. "Were you having a nightmare? You've been sweating." As she reaches a gentle hand toward him, he snatches her wrist, stopping her. "I'm dirty," he insists, his voice strained. "So don't touch me." Seo-woo's gaze softens with concern. She quietly observes that she's never seen him sleep soundly since they arrived, wondering if his nightmares are because his father appeared. A dark, violent memory flashes through Kim Won-hyeok's mind, a hand gripping something sharp against a crimson backdrop. Her eyes drift to his bandaged arm. And that wound. She continues, her voice gentle. Kim Won-hyeok refuses to look at her, his posture rigid. "Why do you suddenly care?" he asks, his tone laced with suspicion, pushing her away emotionally. The silence stretches between them. Rain patters against a clear umbrella as a young woman with glasses walks down a quiet street. She stops, her path blocked by a boy in a school uniform. He's looking for someone. Her expression grows wary as she asks what it matters to him if Ju Won-hyeok is with Seo-woo right now. He looks away, explaining he has some business with Ju Won-hyeok and was just asking in case they were together. He turns back, asking if she knows where he is. Her eyes narrow in suspicion, wondering why this boy would travel all the way to their neighborhood searching for him. The girl with glasses studies the boy, her thoughts racing. She considers if he's trying to catch Ju Won-hyeok and Seo-woo together to start rumors. But his calm expression doesn't fit the part. "You haven't tried going to his house, have you?" she asks. He tells her he already went there. "But no one answered when I rang the bell," he adds, his face unreadable. It seems like no one is home. Staring into the rain, she processes his words. No one's there, but Seo-woo should be. She reassures herself that Seo-woo wouldn't just stay at a stranger's house, trying to quell a rising sense of unease. A sudden, chilling realization washes over the girl with glasses. "Don't tell me." Her heart begins to pound, a frantic drumbeat against the steady rhythm of the rain. She approaches the house's gate, finding it unlocked. It groans open under her hesitant push. "It's open," she breathes, her suspicion growing into a hot spike of anxiety. Swallowing hard, she decides she has to know for sure. Since the door is open, she tells herself, she might as well take a look. She steps cautiously over the threshold into the silent home. A memory surfaces for Seo-woo. That day, she thinks, I might have just been mistaken. The sharp sound of a lock clicking echoes in her mind. In the quiet room, Kim Won-hyeok leans in close, the air between them thick and warm. "Is it because you're scared of me?" he murmurs, his gaze intense. Seo-woo's heart pounds. Confused by his sudden interest, She asks him to just treat her normally. Don't do anything more than that, she pleads. As she starts to speak his name, he suddenly pulls away. I'm going to go wash up, he states, turning and leaving her alone in the charged silence. In the bunker's bathroom, Kim Won-hyeok stands silently over the sink. He holds his arm under the cool stream of the faucet, watching the dark red stains snake across his skin. The water swirls into a grim vortex, carrying the crimson evidence down the drain and away from sight. Elsewhere, a girl's eyes widen in horror behind her glasses, reflecting the same terrible color. She claps a hand over her mouth, a choked, desperate gasp escaping her lips. Her body trembles as she stares down at an awful discovery, the shocking truth unfolding before her. The sound of water fills the heavy air as Kim Won-hyeok rinses his arm in the sink. Seo-woo watches him from the couch, the small space between them feeling unusually warm. Breaking the silence, she softly asks if his restless sleep is because of his father, then points out the wound on his arm. He turns, his gaze intense as he questions her sudden interest. The atmosphere thickens, and Seo-woo's heartbeat quickens. She looks away, a flicker of worry on her face, wondering if she has just crossed an unspoken line. A heavy realization settles over Seo-woo. Her heart aches with the thought that he sees her concern as an act, a pretense born only from fear. She worries he thinks she's being fake right now, too. Kneeling by the couch, she wonders if telling him the truth would even matter anymore. As rain begins to fall outside, a low whirring sound fills the bunker. In the bathroom, a shirtless Kim Won-hyeok crouches, the warm air of a hairdryer focused on his clothes, adding a strange heat to their isolated world. The warm, humming air flowing from the bathroom abruptly stops. Seo-woo looks at the fresh bandages in her hands, her mind made up. She can't pretend not to care about what he's going through, not when they're trapped here together. A sudden, sharp pop echoes through the bunker, and the world plunges into absolute darkness. The sudden silence is heavy. Disoriented, Seo-woo's hands press against the floor as her heart pounds. She can't see a thing, wondering if the storm outside has stolen their only light. In the suffocating darkness, Seo-woo realizes the long path back to the main room is treacherous, filled with unseen debris. Her heart pounds with the thought of finding a flashlight. Suddenly, a low voice calls her name, cutting through the silence. Kim Won-hyeok emerges from a doorway, his presence filling the narrow hall. He moves with unnerving confidence before a sharp click echoes. A powerful beam of light slices through the gloom, landing directly on her. He walks forward, the light a warm, intense pressure, his approach making the air feel thick and hot. The flashlight beam pins Seo-woo in place, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The suffocating heat intensifies with every step Kim Won-hyeok takes toward her. He pauses, a troubled expression crossing his face as he mutters to himself. Finding her voice, Seo-woo calls his name into the oppressive darkness. He turns, his shadow swallowing the light. "Were you looking for me?" he asks, his voice low. Before she can answer, he closes the distance in a single stride, his hand wrapping firmly around her arm, a sudden, inescapable warmth. Kim Won-hyeok pulls her closer, the heat radiating from his skin in the narrow space. "Why are you wandering around?" he asks, his voice a low reprimand. "Can't you just stay put?" A jolt goes through Seo-woo. She feels a damp warmth on his arm and looks down. "Wait," she murmurs, her eyes widening at the sight of his injury. "Your arm is wounded." Concern eclipses her fear, and she reaches for him, offering the bandages she brought. But before she can help, his expression hardens. He snatches her hand, lacing his fingers tightly with hers, and pulls her forward into the suffocating darkness. He pulls her deeper into the oppressive heat, his voice laced with cynical disbelief. "You were wandering around just for that?" he scoffs, accusing her of suddenly trying to be nice when her mind is consumed with thoughts of leaving. He releases her hand and turns away, but Seo-woo stands her ground. Her gaze lands on a heavy metal door, her expression hardening with resolve. "Let's break it down," she declares, her voice cutting through the silence. She tells him that since they both need to get out, forcing the door is their only option. The air hangs thick and heavy as Kim Won-hyeok retrieves a hammer from the floor, his expression unreadable. Seo-woo convinces herself this is for the best, that her confusing concern for him is just a symptom of their confinement. Once they escape, she thinks, things will go back to how they were. But he doesn't strike the locked exit. Instead, he leads her into another room, a flashlight beam cutting through the gloom to reveal a wall of complex machinery. Huh, she murmurs, her hope faltering. This isn't the way out. Lee Seo-woo's hope shatters. Before her is not an escape, but an impossible view of open water. There's no way, she breathes, her mind racing. There must be another door somewhere in this bunker. The crushing realization sends her stumbling backward, her foot slipping on the unstable ground. She tumbles into the darkness, but her fall is cut short. A firm arm snakes around her waist, pulling her securely against Kim Won-hyeok's chest. A sudden warmth envelopes her as her heart hammers against his back, the shock of the fall replaced by his steady hold. The warmth from Kim Won-hyeok's body radiates through Lee Seo-woo, but a cold dread floods her veins. She trembles in his arms as the crushing weight of their situation settles in. What am I going to do now? She thinks, her hope collapsing. No one is coming for me. Her despair deepens, fearing she'll be forgotten here forever. Won-hyeok looks down, his expression unreadable in the gloom. Then, a flicker of resolve crosses his face. No, he says, his voice low but firm. There is a real way out. Lee Seo-woo rests against Kim Won-hyeok, the steady rhythm of his heart a strange comfort in the dim bunker. He breaks the silence, murmuring that there is a real way out of this place. The revelation hits her like a physical blow. All warmth vanishes as she quickly sits up, looking down at him with wide, shocked eyes. What? She asks, her voice trembling with disbelief and rising confusion. Her mind races with a single, burning question. If he knew about an escape route, why did he keep them trapped here? The question why hangs in the oppressive darkness of Lee Seo-woo's mind. A cold wave of realization washes over her, her heart pounding with a sudden, sharp betrayal. So you really did lock me up? She whispers, the words tasting like ash. She believed he was trapped by accident, just like her, a fool forever worrying. As she trembles, Kim Won-hyeok simply reaches up and pats her head. The touch ignites her fury. In a flash, she grabs him by the shirt, pulling him forcefully towards her. What are you doing? She demands. You have something on you, don't you? Lee Seo-woo's voice is a low, dangerous whisper as she grips Kim Won-hyeok's shirt. He denies it, but she cuts him off. Stop lying. She seethes, her trust shattering like glass. I'm not going to believe anything you say anymore. Fury gives her strength, and she shoves him hard. He stumbles, but in a blur of motion, the tables turn. He surges forward, overwhelming her. The air crackles as he pins her to the cold floor, his warmth a suffocating presence. He captures her wrists, holding her still. Let me out, she gasps. No, Kim Won-hyeok says, his voice dangerously low. Pinned beneath him, Lee Seo-woo feels the oppressive warmth of his body. He leans closer, asking if she knows why he locked her in the bunker. A chilling image flashes through the dark, a darkened weapon lying discarded. His confession hangs in the suffocating air, an admission of taking his own father's last breath. Do you understand now? He murmurs, his shadow consuming her. He explains that if she were to leave, she would only spread rumors, binding her to him with his terrible secret. So just give up on leaving. Kim Won-hyeok's final words hang in the suffocating darkness. When Lee Seo-woo awakens, she is alone. The oppressive warmth of his body is gone, replaced by a sharp, chemical smell that stings her nose. Is that bleach? She mutters, her senses reeling. Her eyes scan the strangely tidy room and land on a large, out-of-place suitcase. Before she can make sense of the scene, a sudden movement causes her to whip her head around, her heart pounding with alarm and confusion. The stifling air, thick with the chemical scent of bleach, hangs heavy in the doorway where Kim Won-hyeok's relative stands. She greets a solemn Lee Seo-woo, explaining she's in the middle of cleaning. A knowing warmth enters her voice as she recalls how the two were inseparable as children, asking if she came to see him. The question, layered with years of shared history, hangs between them. Lee Seo-woo quietly murmurs that they aren't close anymore. The woman's hopeful expression falters, a palpable tension settling in the silence as she realizes their connection has faded. The woman explains to a shadowed Kim Won-hyeok that she had no idea he had company. A nervous sweat forms on her brow as a sudden understanding dawns on her, and she apologizes for intruding before rushing out the door. His cold voice cuts through the sudden silence, asking Lee Seo-woo why she hasn't left. Outside, the gate slams shut, and his relative freezes. Her hand flies to her mouth as a memory of a rain-soaked day surfaces, forcing her to question if she was truly mistaken about what she just saw. Kim Won-hyeok's hand clamps around Lee Seo-woo's wrist, his grip like iron. She gasps, whispering that it hurts as he easily overpowers her. Her desperate attempt to threaten him with the sharp edge is instantly thwarted, the weapon now useless in her trembling hand. With wide, panicked eyes, she demands he let her out, but her voice is a fragile whisper against his overwhelming presence. The air grows thick and warm, her heartbeat a frantic drum in the silence as he stands over her, his shadow swallowing her whole. The air grows thick and warm as Kim Won-hyeok seizes Lee Seo-woo's wrist, guiding the sharp edge she holds until its cold point rests against his own throat. His eyes are unblinking, his voice dangerously calm as he tells her to do whatever she wants. Her hand trembles, a silent testament to her shock. He adds that nothing she does will change a thing. He has no intention of letting her out. A chilling realization washes over Seo-woo as she stares at his unwavering expression. This isn't a bluff. He is completely serious. A new thought cuts through Lee Seo-woo's fear. There has to be another way, a way to back Kim Won-hyeok into a corner. In a sudden, decisive move, she drives the sharp edge not at his throat, but into his shoulder. A sharp groan escapes his lips as he collapses to his knees before her, the impact sending a shudder through his body. Crimson blooms against his white shirt. He looks up, his eyes wide with shock, not anger. The air between them crackles, thick and warm with a dangerous, unspoken intensity. Dark droplets splatter on the cold floor of the bunker. Lee Seo-woo grits her teeth, her hand trembling as she presses the cold metal against her own arm. A shadow looms over her. As Kim Won-hyeok leans closer, she shoves the object forward in a desperate warning. "Don't come," she pleads, her voice a fragile whisper. He ignores her entirely, reaching out and calmly closing his hand around the heavy item. A crimson hue surfaces on his palm as he gently takes her injured arm, his dark, unreadable eyes locking onto hers before he yanks the metal away. Kim Won-hyeok shrugs off his stained shirt, revealing a back marked with old, faded marks. He kneels before Lee Seo-woo, gently pressing the cloth against her injured arm. In the suffocating silence of the bunker, a memory surfaces, a younger Seo-woo, her face streaked with tears. His own voice echoes in his mind from a time long past, a desperate promise. Just one more day? Back in the present, he continues to tend to her injury, his head bowed with an unnerving focus, the cold metal now forgotten on the concrete floor. The suffocating silence in the bunker stretches on. Kim Won-hyeok's low voice suddenly cuts through the air, causing Lee Seo-woo to flinch. He tells her to get her things. With a grating scrape of metal against concrete, he lifts a heavy panel from the floor, uncovering a dark shaft leading down a long ladder. Seo-woo stares, her eyes wide with disbelief as a single thought echoes in her mind. This is the real exit. She can't believe it was hidden in a place like this all along. Lee Seo-woo's mind spins with a single, dizzying thought. The real exit was here this entire time. How could Kim Won-hyeok have possibly known? She cautiously descends the ladder, each footfall a heavy thud echoing in the narrow shaft. He suddenly stops her, offering a dark shirt. "Put this over your eyes," he instructs. She looks up, bewildered. He explains that after so much time in the dark, the sudden light outside will be too harsh for her. Turning away, a faint warmth crosses his cheeks, leaving Seo-woo to clutch the fabric, unconvinced. With hesitant hands, Lee Seo-woo ties the dark fabric over her eyes, plunging herself into total darkness. She knows it's best to obey before he changes his mind. Kim Won-hyeok takes her arm, his touch a steady pressure as he guides her. He warns her not to be alarmed, that they're about to step into water. The groan of a heavy door opening fills the air, and a single thought floods her mind. She's finally going outside. Her bare foot meets the cold liquid, and she slips on the slick ground, struggling to balance with her hands full. Won-hyeok asks if she wants him to hold her bag. "Oh, yeah, that'd be nice," she replies, and in a swift motion, he moves to take it from her. In a swift, unexpected motion, Kim Won-hyeok lifts Lee Seo-woo into his arms. Stunned, she stammers, questioning if he just picked her up. He confirms it, ignoring her frantic protests to be put down as he carries her toward the glowing exit. Once he sets her on solid ground, a blinding flash of white light overwhelms her senses, piercing straight through the dark fabric over her eyes. Reeling from the sudden pain, she wonders what could be so bright. Overwhelmed and disoriented, she instinctively presses her face against his chest, seeking the only available shelter. The overwhelming scent of rain-soaked grass fills Lee Seo-woo's senses. It's a smell she knows, a fragrance that has always clung to Kim Won-hyeok. He gently sets her down, her feet sinking into the soft earth. He tells her they've arrived and that she knows the way back from here. She stands perfectly still, blindfolded and disoriented by her sudden freedom. Just as she starts to turn away, his hand reaches out towards her back. A single word escapes her lips, a trembling whisper. Won-hyeok. As his hand touches her shoulder, Lee Seo-woo asks if he's coming back with her. Kim Won-hyeok flinches at her question, his hand recoiling as if he's been burned. In the blink of an eye, he is gone. Left alone, she hastily rips the blindfold from her eyes. The world comes into focus, a sunlit path surrounded by lush greenery. She calls out his name, but there is no answer. Her mind races with confusion. Where did he go? He was just here. She stands motionless on the grassy ground, completely bewildered by her sudden freedom. Lee Seo-woo stands frozen on the pavement. In the quiet aftermath of his disappearance, it feels as if Kim Won-hyeok was never there at all. A jolt of panic courses through her, and she suddenly breaks into a sprint, dashing through the familiar neighborhood. She tells herself not to think such foolish things. This is where she belongs, in the outside world. Arriving at her front door, her hand stops just before touching the lock. A chilling realization washes over her. How many days was she gone? People must be worried. The question hangs heavy in her mind. What could she possibly say if they ask where she's been? The digital beep of the lock breaks the silence as she steps inside. The air is filled with soft, unsuspecting laughter. Her mother sits on the couch, a placid smile on her face as she casually nibbles on a snack. Everything is peaceful, too peaceful. Did you have a good time? Her mother asks, her voice gentle and warm. The simple question shatters Lee Seo-woo's fragile composure. Her eyes widen in stunned horror, a cold sweat breaking out on her skin. The quiet clatter of a spoon echoes in the bunker. For Seo-woo, the simple sound triggers a painful memory of a crowded dinner table. She recalls the strained conversation, being put on the spot for her lack of appetite, and a boy curtly telling the others to leave her alone. The memory is shattered by Won-hyeok's cold voice. I guess the food at that house was better, he says, his words dripping with insinuation. Seo-woo flinches, her head hanging low. No, it wasn't. She whispers, the past rising like a bitter wave. The ghost of another memory surfaces, a woman in a kitchen, a kind face offering a bowl of food. Back in the present, Won-hyeok mutters that he's fine, his voice barely a whisper. A sudden wave of sickness crashes over Seo-woo. She covers her mouth, feeling ill as she stands abruptly. Later, in the suffocating quiet of her own bedroom, the familiar walls seem to close in. She picks up her phone. For days, her mind reels. She was only trapped for 4 days, yet the flashes of their time together feel like an endless eternity. Flashes of the past blur together in her mind, a painful whirlwind of fear and confinement. Seo-woo reflects on the 4 days she was gone. A bitter realization follows. She clicks her phone screen off, the sound sharp and final in the quiet of her bedroom. A voice cuts through her thoughts. Hey. A girl with glasses stands over her, her expression firm and knowing. Seo-woo looks up, bewildered. The girl's question is an accusation, asking if Seo-woo was at Kim Won-hyeok's house, adding that it isn't like she has anywhere else to go. No. Seo-woo's denial is sharp and immediate, cutting the question short. Her mind recoils, flashing back to a shadowy memory of Won-hyeok and his chilling confession. She silently insists she wasn't at his house. The girl with glasses remains unmoved, her voice laced with cold indifference. She says she doesn't care where Seo-woo stayed, as long as it wasn't with Ju Won-hyeok. Seo-woo's quiet claim of being at a friend's house is met with a harsh shove, sending a bag tumbling and its contents, toiletries for an overnight stay, spilling across the floor. Seo-woo looks up, bewildered by the familiar face. You? The girl with glasses looms over her, her voice a cold whisper as she questions who in this room Seo-woo could possibly call a friend. Her accusatory gaze drops to the fresh bandage on Seo-woo's arm. She scoffs, calling her an attention seeker and asking if she caused those injuries for attention. Seo-woo shrinks under the weight of her words, unable to answer. With a sharp, frustrated sigh, the girl turns away, muttering how exhausting Seo-woo makes everything. Alone again, Seo-woo sits hunched on her bed, a solitary, defeated figure. The stinging words echo in her mind. Am I the one making things exhausting? The question follows her through a haze of lonely moments. Lying in bed, walking through the school, resting her head on a desk while classmates chatter around her. Questions about where she was and what's for lunch are just distant noise. She finds she doesn't even have the energy to deny the accusation. In the bustling cafeteria, her spoon slips from her grip and clatters to the floor. As she stares blankly, a hand suddenly reaches down to retrieve it for her. Strange. The stinging accusation settles deep inside her, and she finds no strength to deny it. A cascade of questions floods her mind. How was she living before? How was she supposed to feel each day? Did she always have to think through every single movement? Gripping the spoon someone returned to her, a terrifying thought surfaces. She can't remember anything. The realization is a cold shock. A desperate resolve forms within her. She to remember how she used to live. As this thought solidifies, her gaze drops, noticing the shoes of the person standing before her. A strange memory surfaces, distant and hazy. She is a small child again, surrounded by classmates during what looks like a school assembly. The other children complain about their tired legs and having to stand for so long. The scene is an emergency safety drill, with men in official uniforms demonstrating equipment on a stage. It feels like a lifetime ago. A sudden commotion arises among the adults. A box of safety masks is missing. There aren't enough for everyone. In the middle of the quiet panic, a small hand clenches tightly around another. The memory sharpens. An instructor holds up a single safety mask, announcing to the children that due to a shortage, they must share in pairs. She urges them to partner up quickly. As the other students scramble to find a friend, a young Seo-woo stands frozen, her expression lost. A voice cuts through the noise. Jaewon, let's be partners. And just like that, another pair is formed. A quiet reflection drifts through her mind. Things were no different back then. A bitter pang of realization hits her as she wonders why this memory has returned now. The scene continues, and a teacher's panicked voice rings out. Our class has an odd number. Her shocked gaze lands on the one child left standing alone. And Seo-woo ended up being the odd one out. The teachers murmur anxiously. With no safety masks left, what are they supposed to do? But then, a solution appears. Another class also has an odd number. A student is using a mask alone. They can just pair them up. A sense of relief washes over them as they wonder who it is. Seo-woo looks back, her cheeks flushing slightly. A jolt of recognition hits her. Ah, she thinks, the memory coming into focus. Right around this time, a safety mask is pulled into place, the strap secured. Through the plastic lenses, a young boy's eye stares back, calm and steady. He stands before her now, her partner for the emergency safety drill. A memory sharpens into focus, the wide, echoing space of a school gymnasium. Seo-woo recalls standing there during an emergency drill, a moment frozen in time. A teacher approaches her younger self and her partner for the drill, a silent boy whose face is hidden behind a safety mask. The teacher expresses hesitation about pairing a girl with a boy for the task, but the young Seo-woo, with wide, determined eyes, quickly insists she is fine with it, sealing a fateful partnership that would linger in her mind for years. In the echoing gymnasium, a memory takes shape. A young Seo-woo approaches her partner, the silent boy in the safety mask, and greets him with a cheerful smile. When he doesn't answer, she playfully nudges his foot with hers, asking why he's so quiet. In the background, other boys whisper and snicker amongst themselves. They wonder aloud why someone so pretty is a loser, and another supplies the answer with a sneer. It's because she hangs out with Won-hyeok. As Seo-woo's own smile falters, Won-hyeok suddenly turns his back on her, leaving her alone and confused. Cruel whispers follow Won-hyeok down the school hall, a venomous secret about his father's past. Hearing the terrible words, he silently walks away, leaving Seo-woo standing alone and confused. Later, she searches for him, finally discovering his hiding spot in the quiet solitude of the schoolyard. I found you, she says gently, her voice breaking the silence. He looks up, his eyes wide with surprise, a fresh mark on his cheek. As she settles beside him, he wordlessly offers her his safety mask, a silent and puzzling gesture that leaves her staring in bewilderment. Seo-woo holds the strange offering, her voice soft as she asks why he ran away. Won-hyeok looks down, questioning why she followed him, explaining she stands out without a partner. Unbothered, She taps the mask playfully, telling him that thanks to his absence, she needs him to teach her how to use it. He snatches it away in a panic, a memory of other children's cruel whispers about an indirect connection flashing through his mind. A blush creeps onto his face as he stammers a quiet, fragile excuse. She can't use it because it's unclean. In a swift, surprising move, Seo-woo snatches the safety mask from his hands and pulls it over her own face. Her eye, wide with a defiant innocence, peers at him through the glass lens. "You aren't unclean," she declares, her voice slightly muffled. Won-hyeok freezes, his expression stunned by her boldness. He watches a blush creep up her cheeks and awkwardly asks if she's hot since her face is so red. Reflecting on this memory, the older Seo-woo wonders why she went out of her way for him like that. The memory shifts to a sunlit room where a young girl named Ji-won sits at her desk. Her mother's voice rings out, "Sweetie, are you home?" Ji-won sighs, annoyed by the interruption, as she's called into the living room. Her mother gets straight to the point, asking why she's been ignoring Seo-woo at school. Ji-won bristles with frustration, arguing that it's not her fault. "We have an odd number of students," she insists, "so why are you blaming me?" The scene dissolves, settling on a young Won-hyeok sitting alone on a staircase, a bandage on his cheek, his expression utterly dejected. The memory shifts to a younger, brighter Seo-woo, who peeks through a window with a wide, innocent smile. "Come out right now. Let's go play," she cheerfully calls out to a dejected Won-hyeok. He follows her along a desolate path, which she explains is a shortcut home from school. As they approach a waterway dotted with concrete posts, she stops him. "Don't go in there," she warns, reminding him they were told not to enter the water because of hidden dangers found in another town. He dismissively points out that it's far away, but she just retorts, "Then you go the long way around," and fearlessly leaps across the concrete blocks herself. As Seo-woo balances on the concrete block, her footing gives way. She gasps, stumbling forward toward the murky water. Just as she pitches forward, Won-hyeok's arms suddenly wrap around her, his firm grip catching her hand. Holding her steady, he quietly tells her she almost fell. Surprised, she looks over her shoulder, realizing he followed her after all. A faint blush creeps across his bandaged cheek. He looks away, muttering for her to just stand up straight. He sits on a nearby post, his gaze downcast, and quietly asks why she isn't afraid of him. Seo-woo thinks about his question. She knows how he sees her, reckless and unafraid. She charges into perilous places, leans precariously out of windows, and keeps reaching out to him, the son of that man. Breaking the silence, she turns his question back on him. "Then am I supposed to be scared of you?" she asks quietly. Her gaze drifts to the water below. She knows that if she gave in to fear, she would only end up avoiding him. A resolute thought forms in her mind. She doesn't want to be without him. Her thoughts drift back to a time of deep loneliness. All she ever wanted was for someone to truly want her, so she would have a place to go back to. A memory surfaces of her younger self, standing alone at a chain-link fence, her gaze fixed on the heavy steel hatch set in the ground below. Back in the present, confined to the darkness of that very bunker, a single tear escapes and traces a path down her cheek. Her heart gives a heavy, painful thud as the full weight of her wish, now cruelly fulfilled, settles upon her. Seo-woo lies alone, consumed by a single, heartbreaking wish, for someone to want her, for a place she could finally go back to. This desperate hope leads her to the old, abandoned bunker. She stands just outside the barbed wire fence, her journey coming to a halt. In the end, she can't bring herself to go inside. Memories of a younger Won-hyeok flicker through her mind, moments of a shared, complicated past. It's not simply the fear he left behind that paralyzes her. Something else, a feeling that still lingers deep within her, stops her from opening that door. A memory surfaces, casting a shadow over Seo-woo's thoughts. In the classroom, she stands before two other girls who occupy her seat. Timidly, she speaks up. That's my chair." The girls ignore her, whispering cruelly amongst themselves. Their eyes drift to the bandages wrapped around her arm, and their hushed words turn venomous, speculating that she caused those marks for attention. The quiet accusation hangs in the air until Seo-woo can't take it anymore. She looks up, her voice sharp. "Did you seriously just say that?" One of the girls pushes her glasses up her nose, unfazed. "Why?" She retorts, "It's obvious you did it because you wanted people to see." The classroom buzzes with cruel whispers, and Seo-woo clenches her fists, paralyzed by their words. The other girl abruptly shoves the chair toward her. "Just take it," she sneers, adding a venomous warning not to cause harm to herself because of her. In that moment, clarity washes over Seo-woo. A profound memory resurfaces, sharp and painful. She finally understands how she has been living. In the empty space of her mind, an overturned chair represents the truth. She was trying to find a permanent escape. It was this forgotten despair that left her feeling so adrift. A sense of finality washes over Lee Seo-woo. She is sinking, pulled down into a sensation deeper than the ground beneath her. It's a strangely familiar feeling, drawing her consciousness back to a dim, concrete hallway. She recognizes this place. As she takes a hesitant step on the dusty floor, a heavy, unsettling sound echoes in the silence. Her gaze falls upon a figure collapsed ahead, Kim Won-hyeok, sprawled amidst a spreading dark shadow. A sharp gasp catches in her throat, her eyes widening in pure shock at the sight. A sudden stir brings Lee Seo-woo out of a deep slumber, the drone of cicadas filling the classroom air. An unsettling vision clings to her, a dream where roles were cruelly reversed. She questions why Won-hyeok looked so defeated when she was the one seeking a final escape. The image of him, resigned and vulnerable with cold metal pressed to his neck, is burned into her mind. As she awakens, a memory surfaces of her once asking how he found her. A new, haunting possibility takes root. What if his reason for being in the bunker was the same as hers? A chilling thought strikes Lee Seo-woo. If Won-hyeok was just like her, then the one left behind in that bunker. A chair clatters against the floor as she bolts from her seat. She sprints past the trees, a desperate thought pushing her forward. I can't be too late. Her hands fumble with a heavy concrete hatch, rattling it uselessly. Another entrance. She remembers another entrance and runs again, her feet pounding the ground. Her wide, frantic eyes scan the area, searching desperately for a way in. It has to be here. Lee Seo-woo throws herself forward, landing before a gaping concrete entrance set deep into the earth. This place. A hazy memory surfaces of standing in this very spot, long ago, with a young boy. A sudden, piercing realization hits her. This is where Kim Won-hyeok brought her when they were children. Fueled by the thought, she kicks off her shoes and plunges through the murky water guarding the entrance. Her bare feet slap against the cold floor as she runs into the oppressive darkness, a single, desperate plea echoing in her mind. A desperate hope rings through Lee Seo-woo's mind. She wishes this is all a delusion, that her fear is unfounded. She pushes deeper into the oppressive darkness of the bunker and sees him, a lone figure slumped against the far wall. Kim Won-hyeok, she yells, her voice echoing as she rushes to his side. She grabs him, and a shock runs through her. His body is completely frozen. He was always so warm before. With a faint gasp, he slumps forward, his head resting heavily on her shoulder in the desolate silence. No, Lee Seo-woo chokes out, pulling Kim Won-hyeok's unconscious form into a desperate embrace. Her voice is a raw whisper as she pleads, "Please, come back." Just as all hope seems to fade, she feels it, a faint, rhythmic pulse against her ear. A heartbeat. Overwhelmed by a wave of relief, they tumble to the cold concrete floor together. She clings to him, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Thank God. His eyes slowly flutter open, unfocused and hazy. A quiet, raspy voice breaks the silence, uttering a name that is not hers. Nam Seo-woo. Kim Won-hyeok, you're awake. Lee Seo-woo's voice cracks with overwhelming relief. But her hope falters as he suddenly shoves her away, turning his back to her. Confused by his sudden coldness, she asks what's wrong. She reaches out, insisting she needs to see his injuries after he was in such a bad state. Don't look, he tells her, his voice flat. Ignoring him, she presses on, but he spins around, pulling her into a tight, desperate embrace. He buries his face against her, his cheeks flushed as he murmurs, I said forget it. Nam Seo-woo. Seo-woo's gaze drifts to a crude, faint drawing of a ladder on the bunker wall. The silence is heavy until Won-hyeok speaks, his voice low as he tends to his bandaged hands. He asks her about the ladder, wondering when she drew it. Before she can process the question, he admits it was his own work. He explains he drew it a long time ago because the bunker's layout was confusing. The confession unlocks a dormant memory in Seo-woo's mind, a fleeting image of them as small children, standing in this very place. Seo-woo's mind drifts, wondering what life would have been like if their paths had never been so complicated. She peeks around a corner and stops, her eyes widening. She sees Won-hyeok sitting with his shirt off, his back covered in harsh, angry marks. A wave of guilt washes over her as she realizes he was injured because of her. Setting her fear aside, she reaches out, offering to apply the ointment for him. Won-hyeok pulls away sharply. He tells her to never mind, warning her not to dirty her hands on him. A hazy memory flickers through Won-hyeok's mind. He turns his intense gaze on Seo-woo, quietly asking if her hesitation is because she doesn't trust him. Startled, she looks up and denies it, insisting she can just wash her hands. But Won-hyeok simply states he doesn't want this mess touching her. Confused by his logic, she asks why he's being this way. The air grows heavy, the scene saturated in a deep, menacing red. His voice drops, heavy with a terrible truth. I took his last breath away, he confesses. My father. Won-hyeok's confession hangs heavy in the air, leaving Seo-woo breathless. A faint memory flickers in her mind, a younger version of herself tending to his scraped knee. The past and present blur. Setting aside her shock, she finds her voice. She can't treat his injuries, but she insists on at least washing his hair for him, especially since his hand was injured because of her. He doesn't protest. As she gently runs her fingers through his hair, the warm water is a stark contrast to the chilling truth he just revealed. It's a fragile, quiet truce. As she continues to wash Won-hyeok's hair, she notices the water soaking through his shirt. This isn't working. It's too difficult to rinse him properly while he's hunched over the sink. With a nervous breath, she asks if he could maybe take his shirt off. The request hangs in the air, heavy and unspoken. A moment later, she notices something strange. You. She begins, her gaze fixed on him. Your ears turn totally red. A flash of worry crosses her face as she wonders if she scrubbed him too hard, and she quickly apologizes, promising to be gentler. Won-hyeok suddenly plunges his head under the running water, completely drenching himself. Seo-woo stares, flustered, asking why he did that. To cool down, he mutters, water dripping from his hair onto the floor. But the water wasn't even hot. She points out his soaked shirt, and he suggests using a hairdryer, but a better idea sparks in her mind. Wait, Ju Won-hyeok, she says, her voice firm, forget the dryer. Hand me your shirt. Later, she unpins the dry shirt from the fence outside, the sun warm on her skin. She presents it to him where he sits shirtless by the entrance, asking if he didn't realize it was sunny. He looks away, calmly stating that he already knew. The lights inside the bunker had come on. A quiet question hangs in the air. Won-hyeok looks up at Seo-woo, asking if she has ever been up on the roof before. Instead of answering, she turns with an unnerving calm and begins to climb a ladder leading even higher. Panic instantly replaces Won-hyeok's composure. He leaps to his feet, shouting her name, his voice strained with fear as he begs her to come down from the precarious edge. But she ignores his pleas, reaching the very top. As she sits on the edge, a ghostly image of her younger self appears beside her. A familiar despair washes over Lee Seo-woo as she gazes down from the rooftop. Just as she remembered, the height isn't enough to find a permanent escape. A wave of self-loathing crashes over her. How pathetic she was to have considered it. In a flash, Won-hyeok lunges, yanking her back from the brink. They crash onto the concrete, a tangle of limbs. He looms over her, his eyes wild with a mixture of fury and terror. Are you crazy? He shouts, his voice trembling with desperation. What if you had really met your end? His words hang, unfinished, in the tense air. Lying on the rough concrete, Lee Seo-woo's dazed expression sharpens into one of cold resolve. In a sudden, fluid motion, she twists her body, her sandal sliding from her foot. With a surge of desperate strength, she drives her heel upwards, striking Won-hyeok with surprising force. No, she thinks, the single word echoing in the silence of her mind. If even this doesn't give me a final escape. A montage of painful memories flashes before her eyes. Isolation at school, lonely walks, the weight of a life she cannot bear. A fleeting memory flashes through Lee Seo-woo's mind, a boy somersaulting over her in a sun-bleached past. The vision vanishes as she sees Won-hyeok hunched on the concrete, muttering an unfamiliar name. He looks up, his voice low as he makes a strange proposal. While they are trapped, they should forget the outside world, pretending that nothing ever happened between them. Lying on the ground, Seo-woo gazes back. A faint, unreadable smile plays on her lips as she considers his twisted pact, her expression holding a new, unsettling confidence. A memory drifts into focus, hazy and tinged with green. Seo-woo recalls a fragile proposal she made to Won-hyeok. She suggested that for the time they were in the bunker, they could forget everything about the outside world. Her voice echoes over the image of a fenced-in schoolyard, pleading to pretend that nothing bad ever happened to them. In the present, she lies on the floor, looking up at him with expectant eyes. "How does that sound?" she asks softly. Won-hyeok remains still, hunched over the table in the oppressive darkness, lost in thought. Kim Won-hyeok's intense gaze softens as he looks down at Lee Seo-woo. He slowly lowers himself, lying down on the cold floor beside her, their faces now just inches apart. The oppressive silence is broken by his quiet acceptance. "Okay," he murmurs, his breath warm in the still air. "Let's do that." The dark bunker fades away, replaced by the bright light of a memory. A younger Lee Seo-woo sits beside a boy whose arm is wrapped in bandages. She pleads with him, "Nam Seo-woo, don't do something dangerous like earlier." He asks what she means, and she replies, sitting on the edge of that drop. The boy, his back still to her, questions if it really looked that dangerous. With an unwavering gaze, Lee Seo-woo simply confirms that it did. A moment of understanding passes between them. She scoots closer, leaning against him on the ledge. "It's fine here, right?" she says softly, "since it's not the edge." Suddenly, he grabs her arm and yanks her away from the drop, pulling her to safety on the flat surface of the roof. He explains he did it because she always pulls something unpredictable. She looks at him, confused, and her gaze drifts to the sprawling cityscape below. The view is dizzying. The entire neighborhood stretches out beneath them. From the dizzying height of the rooftop, Lee Seo-woo's gaze fixes on a distant building. She remarks that she can even see their school from here, a touch of wonder in her voice as she questions if anyone below could possibly spot them. Turning her head, she looks at the boy beside her. "Ju Won-hyeok," she says, her tone suddenly serious. "Can you do me a favor?" The memory blurs, fading into the stark light of a classroom where she sits alone, staring out the same window. Other students whisper, cruelly mocking her vacant expression. A girl approaches Lee Seo-woo's desk, breaking the classroom quiet. She asks what's so interesting outside the window, but Seo-woo gives no response, her gaze lost somewhere beyond the glass. Another student snickers, pointing out how she was just ignored. Annoyance flashes across the girl's face, and she kicks Seo-woo's chair. "Hey, are you deaf?" she snaps. Still met with silence, her anger boils over. She slams her hand on the desk, rattling it as she leans in to shout. And finally, Seo-woo slowly turns her vacant eyes up to meet her gaze. "I asked you a question," the girl screams, her voice sharp in the silent classroom. Amid the commotion, a phone tumbles from the desk, clattering onto the floor. The bully's patience finally shatters. With a frustrated curse, she grabs the collar of Lee Seo-woo's uniform, forcing her head down onto the wooden desk. "Are you mad?" she taunts, her voice dripping with scorn. "Whatever." But Lee Seo-woo gives no response, her shoulders just trembling slightly as she stares into the grain of the wood, utterly detached from the cruelty surrounding her. What was that? The question echoes in Lee Seo-woo's mind. Her hand trembles as it grips the desk. All this time, they treated her like air, like she was nothing. The teacher's arrival scatters her tormentors, but Seo-woo remains detached, her spirit already elsewhere. Her gaze drifts to the window, a portal to a faded memory. A boy's voice, Won-hyeok, asks her to go to the blast wall, curious if she's visible from far away. As her eyes focus, she sees him, a lone silhouette standing where he promised he would be. A sudden, stifled laugh cuts through the quiet classroom. The girl responsible quickly covers her mouth, feigning a cough and stammering an apology as others turn to look. Lee Seo-woo's mind whirls, her thoughts fixated on the boy outside. Did he really do it? Her eyes find Won-hyeok through the window, a solitary figure pacing by the wall before finally taking a seat. A hot flush of embarrassment creeps up her neck as she hides her face. To think that someone like Won-hyeok would actually do this, all for her. A smile Lee Seo-woo can't suppress spreads across her face. She buries her blushing cheeks in her arms, her heart fluttering with the thought of seeing his reaction. Later, she arrives at the blast wall and steps into the dark bunker. "Ju Won-hyeok," she calls out into the gloom. "Are you sleeping?" Her hand finds a switch, and with a flick, harsh light floods the corridor. Won-hyeok flinches, shielding his eyes from the sudden glare. Seo-woo stands in the doorway, beaming. "What? You weren't sleeping?" she says, her voice bright and cheerful. A bright, teasing smile plays on Lee Seo-woo's lips as she looks at Won-hyeok. "You really went up to the blast wall?" she asks. She confesses she didn't think he'd do it, but she kept watching just in case, and she's glad she did. Recalling the sight of him pacing, she touches her own cheek, admitting how difficult it was to keep from laughing in class. Won-hyeok stays silent, his gaze lowered. Then, his hand gently cups her face, and he pulls her into a sudden, quiet embrace. Startled, she whispers his name, Ju Won-hyeok. A click echoes as a switch is flipped, bathing the dark space in a sudden, harsh light. A memory washes over Lee Seo-woo. She sees herself as a student again, turning with a brilliant smile. "You're awake," she says, her voice bright. The image of a younger Kim Won-hyeok appears, looking down thoughtfully. She remembers asking if he truly climbed the blast wall, confessing how she struggled to keep from laughing at school. In the memory, his hand gently cups her cheek, and her eyes close in pure bliss. The sweet moment dissolves into white. Kim Won-hyeok, she thinks. The tender memory continues. A younger Lee Seo-woo stands flustered, asking why he's touching her face. She finds it hard to just stand there under his prolonged gaze. With a quick motion, Kim Won-hyeok pulls his hand away. "Ah," he murmurs, revealing a tiny, sharp fragment between his fingers. He quietly explains that's what he was removing. As her younger self looks down in silent understanding, the memory dissolves, replaced by a painful flash, the image of his shirtless back, marred and stained, as he examines the same small object. The memory fades, leaving Lee Seo-woo in the dusty reality of the bunker. She looks around and proposes they clean the place. Since they are staying here, she reasons, it might as well feel like home. Kim Won-hyeok agrees without hesitation. Surprised by his quick compliance, she asks if he has any masks for the dust. He pauses, then says he has something similar. A moment later, they stand side by side, both wearing imposing, full-face safety masks. A muffled laugh escapes from behind Lee Seo-woo's mask. "Safety masks," she chuckles, amused by the absurdity. Her voice, muffled by the mask, explains her laughter. She says the moment reminds her of a time he had to catch her after she ditched the auditorium. A strange sense of nostalgia fills the dusty air. To make things more interesting, she turns to him, holding a pair of tongs and a plastic bag. She proposes a bet. The first one to fill their bag gets a wish. After a silent pause, Kim Won-hyeok agrees. Lee Seo-woo walks off to begin, leaving him standing alone. His intense gaze settles on a sharp, jagged fragment on the floor, and he carefully plucks it from the debris. The playful game begins. Lee Seo-woo teases Kim Won-hyeok, directing the sharp fragment into his bag. Their cleaning competition quickly turns into a frantic scramble for debris. "Hey, that's cheating," she yells, her voice distorted by the mask. Soon, they collapse onto a dusty surface, pulling the masks from their faces to gasp for air. "Stop," Lee Seo-woo pants. "Let's stop the bet. We aren't getting any cleaning done." But Kim Won-hyeok looks at the two plastic bags beside them. One is significantly fuller. "I won," he states simply. Exhausted, she leans against him. "You're so relentless," she murmurs. "All right, I'll grant your wish. What are you going to ask for?" Kim Won-hyeok's expression turns pensive, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. He'll tell her his wish, he murmurs, when she goes home. Lee Seo-woo props herself up, her curiosity piqued. She tells him he can't just leave her hanging. A faint blush dusts her cheeks as she watches him, thinking how easily flustered he still gets, just like he used to. A profound sense of relief washes over her. He is still the person she remembers. The memory shifts to a coffee shop, and she recalls she wasn't the only one. The memory shifts to a sunlit cafe where the voices of classmates are sharp and cruel. They lean in, gossiping about a girl named Nam Seo-woo who had a strange laughing fit at school. She must have lost her mind, one girl scoffs. Lee Seo-woo remains silent, her expression unreadable behind her glasses as she slowly stirs the ice in her glass. The friends talk about how annoying it must be for the person who lives with her. "I knew you'd agree," one says, advising Lee Seo-woo to simply ignore the girl. The cruel suggestion echoes in the cafe, to treat her as if she doesn't exist, just as they always have, because that torments her more. The memory dissolves, replaced by a past moment in the cluttered bunker. Lee Seo-woo and Kim Won-hyeok sit together, the task of cleaning the long hallway before them. She sighs, lamenting they'll never finish today. A sudden realization sparks in her eyes. "Wait, is tomorrow the weekend?" she asks. Her expression brightens as she looks at him, declaring that she can stay there all day. A radiant smile spreads across Lee Seo-woo's face. She suggests they finish all the cleaning together over the weekend, her voice full of hope. Kim Won-hyeok looks down, his expression unreadable as he quietly agrees. As she prepares to leave for the day, he tells her to guard the bunker well. She laughs, retorting that she isn't a dog, before asking about his wish. He says his original one was too easy, so he'll think of another. The bright memory fades. A door echoes shut, leaving Won-hyeok standing alone, head bowed in quiet sorrow. Kim Won-hyeok stands motionless in the now empty classroom. He walks to the wall, his hand reaching out to flick the light switch. The room plunges into sudden, complete darkness. His solitary footsteps echo through the void as he finds a chair and collapses into it, the sound swallowed by the silence. The memory of her hopeful voice fills his mind, her joyful realization that the weekend was near. I can stay here all day. He leans his head against his hand, lost in the echo of a shared moment, a stark contrast to his profound loneliness. A memory rushes back to Seo-woo, triggered by Won-hyeok's intense gaze. Earlier, she tries to leave, politely announcing her departure into the silent hallway. His voice stops her, a simple request from behind a closed door to bring him a towel. A strange sense of déjà vu washes over her as she complies. Hesitantly, she offers it, but in a blur, the door flies open. Won-hyeok's hand shoots out, grasping hers with startling force and pulling her into his space. His current command hangs heavy in the air, "Stay the night." A wave of regret washes over Lee Seo-woo. She should have just left. She stammers, telling Kim Won-hyeok she really needs to go home, but his reply is a flat, simple no. His voice is low and steady as he turns toward her, a chilling look in his eyes. He reminds her of a bet they made, declaring that if she stays any longer, he's going to use his wish. A dreadful feeling sinks into her heart. She senses something is about to happen, and it won't be good. In the end, this is where she stays. The room is quiet, lit by a single lamp. Lee Seo-woo sits hunched on one couch, stealing a worried glance at Kim Won-hyeok, who lies on another. Just as she suspected, he's still awake. A thought crosses her mind. She always falls asleep first, but tonight, she's too on edge. Hearing him stir, she whispers his name into the stillness. He turns toward her, his expression unreadable. "If you can't sleep because of nightmares," she offers softly, "want me to tell you how to stop them?" Kim Won-hyeok asks what she means. Lee Seo-woo explains her simple trick for pleasant dreams. Just before sleeping, picture exactly what you want to dream about. A fleeting memory of their youth surfaces as she speaks. "If you keep at it," she says with a gentle smile, "it actually works." He remains unconvinced, asking what happens if just thinking isn't enough. Flustered, she suggests keeping something related to that dream close by. His gaze falls upon her, intense and unwavering. "Then," he murmurs, his hand hovering just above her face, "I guess I'll only be able to sleep on days like today." A single drop of water rolls off a blade of grass. Lee Seo-woo stirs, her eyes fluttering open to the dim bunker. She sits up, a question forming on her lips. "Ju Won-hyeok, why?" She asks why he keeps the lights off when he's always awake when she arrives. Lying on his back, Kim Won-hyeok explains calmly that he doesn't need them when he's alone. He turns them on when she gets there for one simple reason. "You hate the dark," he states plainly. Her breath catches. She pulls the blanket closer, his words echoing in the silence. Kim Won-hyeok lies still, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Lee Seo-woo's voice drifts from where she rests, her back turned to him. She murmurs that she might not come back, her tone heavy as she tells him not to wait. His eyes widen, a flicker of raw emotion breaking through his stoic facade. As rain patters against the bunker outside, a single tear escapes and falls from his eye. He moves silently, looming over her sleeping form. His shadow envelopes her as he hovers close, a silent, sorrowful guardian in the dark. A single, agonizing question escapes Kim Won-hyeok's lips as his shadow falls over her sleeping form. "Why?" With a sudden gasp, Lee Seo-woo's eyes snap open, the image of him vanishing into the dim reality of the bunker. She touches her face, her breath unsteady as she realizes it was just a dream. The scene shifts to a bright, sunlit memory of a home. A girl with glasses eats at a low table as her mother approaches, her expression unreadable. The woman's voice cuts through the quiet, asking about Seo-woo, wondering if she's been visiting Won-hyeok's house. In a sunlit living room, a mother scoffs at the explanation, muttering that it must have been some other boy. She can't believe Lee Seo-woo would ever approach that hap boy. Her daughter, Nam Seo-woo, sits silently, lost in a memory of a school bag placed carefully on a desk. A chilling thought surfaces as she rests her chin in her hand. Her mother thinks was the one who packed the bag. An image of Lee Seo-woo's deceptively sweet smile flashes in her mind, leaving one unsettling question hanging in the air. Why hasn't she cracked yet? The school day ends, but Nam Seo-woo lingers, lost in thought. She debates visiting him, the memory of a strange dream making her hesitate. A small, anxious part of her believes he might be waiting for her. Before she can decide, her feet have already chosen a path. A quiet voice calls out, "Hey." She turns to see Lee Seo-woo, who simply continues on, walking in the opposite direction of her own home. Nam Seo-woo watches her go, a quiet conclusion forming in her mind. She must not be going to Kim Won-hyeok's place after all. A girl with glasses approaches Lee Seo-woo, her tone laced with knowing curiosity. She asks if Seo-woo spent the weekend at his place again, casually noting it must be a boy who lives alone. The question makes Lee Seo-woo freeze, her eyes wide with alarm. Memories flash through her mind. A stark warning to be careful with him, the soft fabrics in the men's clothing section, the quiet realization that his home feels safer than her own. Her friend suggests she just stay there again tonight. "No," Lee Seo-woo answers, her voice flat as she walks past. "I'm not going there today." Fingers tap against a glowing phone screen as a woman with glasses rests in her bunk. The door creaks open, and her roommate enters, looking tired as she dabs a towel at her hair. She wonders aloud why her friend's behavior has changed so suddenly, reminding her that she used to walk on eggshells around her. As she reaches for the doorknob, explaining that she always comes home to sleep, her roommate's voice cuts through the quiet. "Who asked you to?" she asks coldly, telling her to stay over at the other place instead. A chilling question cuts through the silence. The girl in bed asks her roommate how she can still come back after seeing that. Confused, the girl standing by the door can only wonder what she means. Her mind flashes to a paper bag tucked away under a desk, a seed of suspicion blooming. She demands to know how her friend knew what was hidden inside, recalling the moment the bag was upended, its contents spilling as if by design. Annoyed, the girl in bed grips her phone, muttering about her bringing it up again, a wave of panic rising in her thoughts. The girl in bed pushes herself up, a piercing look behind her glasses. "Why do you always look at things that way?" she asks, her voice laced with accusation. "He could just be a guy friend." Confusion clouds the other girl's face. Her mind recoils, questioning why this is being brought up. She thinks back to when she was close with Won-hyeok, a time when her friend never looked at them with such suspicion. But her roommate scoffs at the comparison, asking if a childhood friendship is the same as letting a man freely enter their home. With the conversation cut short, the girl yanks the blanket sharply over her head, shutting herself away. A heavy, suffocating silence falls over the room. Lee Seo-woo sits alone at her desk, a pained expression twisting her features as the accusations echo in her mind. Under the covers, her roommate lies perfectly still, a silent, unmoving wall between them. The scene dissolves into the cold, empty reality of the present, a stark staircase leading down into the darkness of the bunker where Seo-woo now rests, lost in the quiet misery. The memory drifts back to a quiet, sunlit afternoon. A young Won-hyeok finishes placing a bandage on his cheek. "All done," he murmurs, looking away with a hint of a blush. A younger Lee Seo-woo sits beside him on the steps, her gaze direct and curious. "Why?" she asks softly. "Can you not look people in the eye?" He flinches, turning his head away, but she gently takes his chin, guiding his face back toward hers. "See? You can't," she observes, telling him people are meant to look at each other when they speak. She offers to help him, a sweet promise of support, but he dismisses it, muttering to forget it. It's not like he has a reason to look at anyone anyway. A playful challenge comes to mind. Lee Seo-woo leans in, promising to grant a wish if Kim Won-hyeok can hold her gaze for 10 seconds. He tries, but his eyes quickly dart away. Failed. She encourages him, noting he managed 5 seconds this time, but he shakes his head, believing he can't do better. As he finally looks up, a genuine smile graces her lips. She tells him it's the first time she's truly seen him, realizing he's actually quite handsome, even more so than the most popular boy at school. Kim Won-hyeok turns away, flustered, telling her to stop talking. He covers his face with one hand, unable to handle the compliment. A small, amused smile plays on Lee Seo-woo's lips as she watches him. She thinks to herself that he's blushing again. He always reacts this way when she teases him, falling for it every single time and turning bright red. A wave of nostalgia washes over her. That's why she liked those days. The sweet memory lingers, only to be shattered as a hand suddenly clamps down hard on a slender wrist. The pleasant memory sours, twisting into something darker. Kim Won-hyeok's gentle touch suddenly tightens into a crushing grip around Lee Seo-woo's wrist. He leans over her, his expression unreadable, and demands she finish what she was doing. His voice is low and cold as he asks why she stopped. "Can't you do it anymore?" he taunts. With a sharp gasp, Lee Seo-woo jolts awake. She sits bolt upright on the narrow cot, heart pounding in the cold darkness of the bunker. The sweet recollection has warped into a terrifying nightmare. A sharp gasp escapes Lee Seo-woo, the remnants of the nightmare clinging to her. Why do I keep dreaming about that? She wonders, her thoughts spiraling. The cold bunker fades away, replaced by the familiar halls of her old high school, surrounded by the faceless silhouettes of other students. She walks with a heavy heart. She remembers this day, the one she purposely skipped. Won-hyeok's unsettling question from her dream echoes in her mind. Is now the same as when we were kids? His words stop her, her hand freezing just shy of a classroom door. Fragments of a brighter past flash through Lee Seo-woo's mind. She sees herself in the classroom with Kim Won-hyeok, their faces close as they share a quiet joke. Another memory surfaces, them as younger kids, her arm slung casually over his shoulders. These glimpses of a once simple connection haunt her as she stands frozen at the classroom door. Her fingers dig into the wooden frame as she watches him inside. A painful question burns inside her. Why did it have to be this way? Why was this twisted fate reserved only for them? In the sunlit classroom, a friendly chatter fills the air. One boy teases another about his peeling lips, offering him some lip balm. Lee Seo-woo watches the mundane interaction from her desk, a quiet observer. Suddenly, Kim Won-hyeok steps into their space. A heavy thud echoes as he slams a phone onto the desk, its screen active like a mirror. The air grows thick and heavy. "Look at yourself," Won-hyeok commands, his voice sharp and cold. The casual teasing dies instantly, replaced by a stunned, heavy silence as his intense presence dominates the room. The classroom buzzes with casual chatter as one girl playfully offers her friend a lip tint. From her desk, Lee Seo-woo watches them, her mind a tangled mess of thoughts, wishing everything would just go quiet. She wonders why no one else seems to notice the undercurrents swirling beneath the surface. Her thoughts drift away, lost in fragmented memories. A classmate's voice suddenly cuts through the haze, pulling her back. He tells her the science teacher wants to see her in the faculty office. Her heart skips a beat. That's Kim Won-hyeok's homeroom teacher. In the hollow silence of an empty classroom, Kim Won-hyeok sits alone, head bowed. He glances down at his tightly bandaged hand, a heavy sigh escaping his lips as he wonders if she will fail to appear again today. Meanwhile, Lee Seo-woo stands nervously in the faculty office, the air thick with an unspoken tension that makes her heart race. She quietly announces her presence to the teacher. He confirms her name is Lee Seo-woo and leans forward, his expression growing serious. He explains his concern over a student who has been absent for a week, Kim Won-hyeok. The teacher's question about their friendship ignites a quiet fire in her chest. A hazy memory of her and Won-hyeok flickers through her mind, a forgotten warmth. "We were just close back then," she explains, her voice barely a whisper against the suffocating silence. He breaks it by questioning why she would associate with someone like him, brandishing an attendance warning as proof of his character. His words are cold and sharp, insisting that boys like Won-hyeok only ruin lives. Each judgment feels like a personal strike, making her heart beat a frantic rhythm. The teacher's patronizing words fill the suffocating office air. He mentions her living situation with her aunt, warning her against associating with people from a similar background, implying she shouldn't do anything to bring shame. A hot flush of anger rises in Lee Seo-woo's chest, just as he dismisses her, saying he'll give the attendance notice to the class president instead. A fire ignites within her. "No," she says, her voice sharp and clear. She snatches the paper from his desk, her decision made. "I'll deliver it." Ignoring his protests, she turns and leaves, the question burning in her mind. Why does everyone look at them like that? A wave of defiance rushes through Lee Seo-woo as she rips the attendance notice in half. What do they even know? A warm memory flickers through her mind. A younger her and Kim Won-hyeok sitting close on a flight of stairs. She realizes nothing has truly changed between them. She just wants that simple comfort back. Her decision solidifies. She finds the heavy door and pushes it open with a low groan. The air grows thick and heavy. Inside, Kim Won-hyeok turns, and their eyes lock in the dim light. The heavy door clicks shut behind Lee Seo-woo, plunging the room into a heavy silence. Kim Won-hyeok turns from the wall, his gaze intense. "Why didn't you come yesterday?" he asks, his voice low and accusatory. When she remains silent, he adds, "I almost left this place." Lee Seo-woo's hand instinctively touches her skirt pocket. His eyes immediately fix on the small movement. "What's in your pocket?" He closes the distance between them in an instant, his presence overwhelming. "Why aren't you saying anything?" His shadow envelopes her, the air growing warm and tight. His hand tightens on hers, drawing her closer until the air between them grows warm and heavy. Her heart hammers against her ribs. Lee Seo-woo's gaze drifts to his face. "Your lips are a bit chapped," she murmurs, fumbling for the lip balm in her pocket and offering it. Kim Won-hyeok's expression darkens. "Forget it," he says flatly, noting she's already used it. A fleeting memory surfaces, a classroom, his voice telling her they were friends. He suddenly seizes her hand, taking the balm himself. It's brand new. Flashes of a painful memory surface for Kim Won-hyeok, a voice asking, "Can't you do it anymore?" His silent answer is a firm no. The thought clouds his eyes as he holds her wrist. Seeing his distress, Lee Seo-woo offers to apply the balm for him. "Just stay still," she says softly, stepping closer. The air between them grows heavy. He starts to refuse, another name on his lips, but violently recoils, pushing her hand away. The lip balm flies through the air, hitting the floor and shattering the tense moment. She gasps, startled by his sudden hostility. Kim Won-hyeok's voice drops, his eyes dark as he repeats her words. "A joke between friends?" Stuttering, Lee Seo-woo tries to excuse herself to clean up the fallen lip balm, but he moves in a blur. His leg shoots out, pulling her off balance. He catches her before she falls, pulling her down into his lap. Her breath catches, trapped against him. "I didn't realize you considered me a friend," he says, his tone chillingly calm. He holds the lip balm near her lips. "Then I can do it too, right?" The air grows thick with unspoken threats. A sudden, firm hand cups Lee Seo-woo's cheek, and her breath catches in her throat. Staring into Kim Won-hyeok's unreadable eyes, she stammers, telling him to wait, to let her go. She offers a desperate warning, "Stay away, unless he wants to end up just like her." The threat hangs in the air, but he simply holds her gaze. He had sat down because of his own discomfort, yet he still keeps her pinned closely. Trapped, Seo-woo's mind races. Why is he holding her with such strange intensity? Flashes of a past she desperately tries to forget flood Lee Seo-woo's mind. She stares at Kim Won-hyeok, a heavy question forming in her heart. Is all of this her fault? He breaks the silence, asking what she is thinking about. Seo-woo stammers that it's nothing, but her flustered expression tells a different story. Ignoring her denial, his thumb gently brushes a smudge from her lip before moving to wipe a tear from her eye. The gesture is strangely intimate. "Hey, stop rubbing it," she pleads, her voice barely a whisper. "If you're done now." Kim Won-hyeok whispers, his gaze intense. He leans in, closing the space between them as he holds her face gently. Lee Seo-woo's eyes widen in shock, her mind blank. He presses his lips against hers in a soft, unexpected moment of connection. Just as quickly, he pulls back, his own expression suddenly flustered. Sorry," he stammers, a nervous sweat beading on his skin. A small, almost imperceptible smile forms on her lips, but he pulls away completely, leaving her staring in bewildered silence. A profound emptiness suddenly washes over Lee Seo-woo. Hazy memories of their shared past flash through her mind, leaving a hollow ache in their wake. She needs this feeling to stop, right now. As she reels from the emotional void, Kim Won-hyeok grabs her wrists from behind, dismissing the tension. "It's fine," he says coolly. "I was just messing around. That's just what friends do." He challenges her, asking if she even has friends. After she quietly admits she has none, he calls her a loser. He holds her close, whispering that it's fine for friends to act this way. Lee Seo-woo's mind races as she quietly accepts his twisted logic. "I get it," she murmurs, gathering her hair into a tie. Internally, however, a storm of confusion rages. How can he possibly understand something about her that she can't even grasp herself? This new, hollow feeling is far worse than before. Suddenly, Kim Won-hyeok seizes her hands, pulling her close. "No," she cries out, shutting her eyes tightly. "Whatever you're thinking, you're wrong." He holds her firmly as she struggles to form a coherent thought. "To me, you're," she begins, but the words falter, leaving the truth unspoken between them. His voice is a low murmur, calling her his only, before he suddenly sweeps her into his arms. Seo-woo cries out his name in alarm as he carries her directly into a pool of murky water, the cold shock silencing her protest. "Is friends what you want?" Kim Won-hyeok asks, his gaze steady. "I'll play along, but on one condition." She weakly tells him to let her go, but he explains she'll only be trapped longer if he drops her. Defeated, she asks for his condition. He looks away, questioning if she has anyone else. Her pained expression confirms she has no one. A low murmur escapes Kim Won-hyeok's lips as he declares, "You're the only friend I have." Seo-woo's confusion mounts. She reminds him he was just calling her a loser, asking if he likes her that way. A faint, knowing smile touches his face as he turns the question on her, accusing her of enjoying the situation. "Yeah," she admits, the word a soft breath. "How could I not?" He replies, his voice laced with an unsettling intensity. He suddenly stumbles through the water, blaming her for his isolation before bracing a hand against the cold wall, pinning her close. A soft breath escapes Kim Won-hyeok as he leans closer, his words a ghost against her skin. He reminds her that he still hasn't told her his condition. The overwhelming tension triggers a memory, pulling Seo-woo back into the past. She's a student again, isolated at her desk, while whispers echo around her. Consumed by regret, she wonders how things ended up this way. Her mind drifts, questioning the source of an old fear she can't quite place. A forgotten unease bubbles up as she remembers peering through a window, a hidden observer. The memory of the classroom haze fades as Seo-woo ponders Kim Won-hyeok's strange condition. Her thoughts are pulled back to the oppressive darkness of the bunker. He holds her close, his voice a low whisper against her ear, finally revealing his terms. He demands that she have no friends besides him, a possessive promise to remain by her side forever. The words echo back through time. In the sunlit classroom, she recalls his demand. It seemed so childish then, but it was also exactly what she secretly wanted. The memory sharpens, focusing on the teacher at the front of the room, who announces a new transfer student. He is directed to the empty seat at the back, right next to her. The classroom memory continues. Seo-woo sits by the window, glancing at the bandages on Kim Won-hyeok's face. She muses on her isolation, wondering why she would ever make friends if things could just remain this peaceful. Suddenly, a hand slams against the window frame right beside her head. Another student leans over her desk, his presence casting a sudden shadow. Seo-woo flinches, looking up with wide, startled eyes. The boy smiles down at her, a strange glint in his eyes. "Hey," he says, his voice casual. "It's been a while, Nam Seo-woo." A voice cuts through the classroom quiet. Seo-woo looks up to find Kim Won-hyeok standing over her desk, a faint, unsettling smile on his bandaged face. "It's been a while," he says. Her eyes widen as a dark, fragmented memory flashes through her mind. This is him, the boy she was warned about. A cold sweat forms on her brow as he leans closer, his voice low and intense. "Remember me?" Trapped by his gaze, she can only stammer out a hesitant, fearful confirmation. The boy leans closer, a soft smile on his bandaged face as he asks for her name. Panic flashes in Seo-woo's eyes. Why is he talking to her? She stammers an apology, confessing that her memory is hazy from the time that has passed. His smile falters, but before he can respond, a loud voice shatters their quiet moment. Another student claps him on the shoulder, and suddenly a boisterous crowd surrounds their desk. Watching him laugh easily with his friends, a distant memory returns to Seo-woo. Ji Sung-chan. She thinks, right, he was always that kind of kid. She remembers now. Ji Sung-chan was always the kind of boy everyone wanted to be around. Having someone like that sit next to her is jarring. It makes her feel like she's the one sitting in the wrong seat. Her gaze drifts to the classroom window, her mind wandering to another boy. If Kim Won-hyeok were the one next to her, how would that have felt? The memory shifts. She's writing at her desk when a pen suddenly starts scribbling on her paper, and she looks up, startled, to find Ji Sung-chan leaning over her shoulder. A pen scribbles across her textbook, and Lee Seo-woo's breath hitches. She wonders if people who act with such ease are fearless, or if they just see her as a pushover. She timidly asks him not to draw on her things, but he ignores her, moving to doodle a caricature on the wooden desk instead. Suddenly, a teacher looms over them, his voice sharp with anger. He raises a hand to reprimand the boy, but Ji Sung-chan just smiles. "Ah, sir, careful with the head," he says calmly, pointing to the drawing. "I drew you." A phone camera clicks, capturing the teacher's caricature. Lee Seo-woo wonders if this is his secret, this effortless charm that draws everyone to him. The classroom buzzes with excitement as students flock to his desk, amazed by his talent. The crowd grows, their voices a lively hum around the desk where she sits in silence. A classmate leans in, asking Ji Sung-chan about a previous incident involving someone named Won-hyeok. The atmosphere shifts slightly. Sung-chan just dismisses it, telling his friend to let it go. It's all in the past. With a casual wave, the boy shoos the crowd away, announcing that the bell just rang. Lee Seo-woo glances up, knowing it hasn't. The students groan and scatter, their voices fading until only the soft hum of the empty room remains. A deep sense of relief washes over her. Finally, it's quiet. She savors the silence, but a sudden shift beside her makes her jump. The bandaged boy asleep at the next desk turns his head toward her. Her heart pounds. For a frightening moment, she's convinced she spoke her relief out loud. A quiet sigh escapes Lee Seo-woo as she sits alone on a bench, finally away from the classroom chaos. She wonders if he sent the crowd away because of her. It's better this way, she thinks, popping open a soda. They would just swarm him again anyway, and life would be easier if he paid her no mind. "There you are." A voice cuts through her thoughts. She flinches, startled. Ji Sung-chan stands right behind her. He leans in with a small smile, teasingly wondering if this is the kind of place Nam Seo-woo would go. Stunned, she asks why he was looking for her. He just smiles faintly. "Just," he says, reaching a hand toward her. Ji Sung-chan's hand hovers near her shoulder as he explains he almost got lost trying to find her. Lee Seo-woo nervously takes a sip from her drink, suggesting he be more comfortable with his own friends. She assumes he's only talking to her because a teacher told him to. He looks down, a shadow crossing his face. "I don't really remember those guys," he says quietly. A memory of the crowded classroom flashes by. He admits that even though they all knew him so well, he didn't know them and couldn't speak. Lee Seo-woo listens to him speak, and a memory flashes through her mind. Ji Sung-chan, always surrounded by friends, always smiling. She takes a thoughtful sip of her drink, a sense of understanding dawning on her. She remembers the quiet loneliness of the classroom, the feeling that being a complete stranger is sometimes better than forcing an awkward connection. It's a painful loneliness she knows well. A surprising thought surfaces as she observes him. Come to think of it, Ji Sung-chan doesn't seem to hold any grudge against Won-hyeok at all. Ji Sung-chan's gaze sharpens, and he asks a single, pointed question. Why? He thought she hated it. As he sits beside her, a strange intensity in his eyes, he wonders aloud, "Aren't you going to stop me?" The question sends a jolt through Lee Seo-woo, and a vivid memory rushes back to her. A lone figure sits high atop a retaining wall, the wind rustling his hair as he overlooks the city below. It was Ji Sung-chan. She remembers seeing him from the school that day, a startling realization dawning on her. The wind sighs across the desolate rooftop where Won-hyeok stands, a solitary figure against the gloomy sky. He walks along the edge of the barbed wire fence, his steps deliberate and heavy. His gaze drifts downward, lost in a memory that washes over him. He recalls a day from long ago, seeing Lee Seo-woo in her school uniform. Her heart pounds in her chest as she clutches her blazer, her eyes wide. The air between their younger selves was thick with unspoken feelings, an intense connection that has never faded. Back in the present, Won-hyeok jumps down, landing softly on the ground below. Won-hyeok walks along the desolate road, the shadow of a fence wrapping around him like a cage. His voice is a low murmur, asking where she thinks she is going. A possessive warmth spreads through his chest, a memory of her making his heart pound with a fierce heat. He commands her in his mind to get back inside the bunker, his hand clenching into a tight fist. The thought of what he's done flashes through his mind as he reminds himself that she hasn't forgotten what happened between them. In the noisy school cafeteria, Lee Seo-woo sits alone. The quiet clatter of a second lunch tray being placed on her table startles her. A boy with a bandage on his face looks down at her, asking, "Why are you eating alone?" Seo-woo says nothing, her mind reeling. She wonders if he has any idea how she's treated here, that she's always alone. Her thoughts are cut short as a group of girls swarms their table, their voices echoing his name. Ji Sung-chan. They excitedly confirm the rumors of his transfer, overwhelmed by the sudden crowd. Seo-woo just wants to eat and leave. But one girl, complaining about the lack of seats, reaches over and snatches the extra tray from the table. The girl's voice cuts through the noise as she lifts Lee Seo-woo's tray, demanding she move. Complaining that her arm is getting tired, she rushes Seo-woo to leave. Humiliated, Seo-woo flees the table, her mind racing with regret. She hates this panicked feeling, wishing she had just moved right away. Suddenly, a voice from behind asks what she hates. She turns to find the new student, Ji Sung-chan, standing there with his own tray. Flustered, Seo-woo asks why he is following her. He looks at her, confused, and states the obvious, "Because you ditched me." Flustered, Lee Seo-woo defensively insists she only moved out of the way because the other girls arrived. She just wants him to hurry and go back to his new friends. Ji Sung-chan's gaze is steady as he looks at her untouched tray. He offers a simple solution. They can go to the snack bar, his treat, and she can show him around the school. Leaving the other girls to whisper about their strange pairing, he walks away. After she guides him through the halls, she asks if he memorized the layout. He just smiles, saying he'll figure it out by following her. With her hands clasped nervously, Lee Seo-woo tries to push Ji Sung-chan away for his own good. She quietly warns him that being seen with her won't do him any favors, and if he's only clinging to her out of loneliness, he should find someone else. Instead of leaving, he leads her to a sunlit art room. He pats the stool next to his easel and makes a simple request, for her to sit so he can draw her. The soft scratching of his pencil fills the air as Seo-woo poses, silently wondering why she agreed so easily. He suddenly stops. "Nam Seo-woo," he says, getting her name wrong. She looks up, utterly confused. Ji Sung-chan continues sketching, his focus unwavering as he asks about her favorite place. Lee Seo-woo fidgets, vaguely suggesting somewhere quiet like the library. When he brings up the pavilion, she thinks back to how she only went there to avoid him in the first place. She finally admits she doesn't really have one. His voice is surprisingly gentle. "It's good to have at least one thing you like," he advises, his pencil still moving. "It gives you a place to run away to." The words settle over her, a strange comfort. He stops, announcing, "All done." He holds the drawing out to her. "Here." Lee Seo-woo's eyes widen as she takes in the sketch. It's her, yet it's a softer, gentler version of herself she doesn't recognize. Stunned, she can't find her voice. Ji Sung-chan teases her, asking if she's touched by the gesture. Flustered, she quietly admits she has never received anything like this before. She manages an awkward laugh, thanking him but adding that he drew her prettier than she is. "That's what you look like," he replies earnestly. He insists he's serious, explaining, "It's because you don't know yourself at all." Ji Sung-chan's words echo in Lee Seo-woo's mind as she walks through a quiet, green path, a place to run away to. She realizes with a sinking feeling that she has no idea what she truly likes. He has his drawing, his passion, but what does she have? Lost in thought, she nearly walks right into someone. Her head snaps up. Kim Won-hyeok is there, leaning against a post with his arms crossed. "What are you thinking about, staring at the ground like that?" he asks. Startled, she breathes his name, asking what he's doing here. A dark shadow flickers across Kim Won-hyeok's face, a sudden change that Lee Seo-woo notices with a jolt. Before she can question it, he lurches forward, resting his head heavily against her shoulder. "I can't go that far," he murmurs, his voice low and strange. He thinks about how he can finally hear her voice again, a sound he missed. Seo-woo freezes, completely bewildered by his actions and rambling words. His hand gently touches the back of her neck as he asks a chilling question. "Today, I went up on the retaining wall. Did you see me?" Surrounded by the muted green of the forest, Won-hyeok stands impossibly close to Seo-woo, his hand gently holding her face. He quietly reveals that he climbed the wall today. Her eyes widen as she asks if he saw her. He reminds her of her promise to always keep her eyes fixed on him, his words soft but heavy. A wave of guilt washes over Seo-woo, and she stammers an excuse, not expecting him to climb it again. He simply promises to watch for her tomorrow before insisting she hand over her bag. Won-hyeok gently tugs a folded paper from Seo-woo's bag. Unfurled, it reveals a delicate sketch of her face, drawn with a careful hand. She lets out a soft gasp as the memory washes over her, pulling her back to a quiet classroom. She recalls watching Won-hyeok stare at that very same drawing for what felt like an eternity. Her mind had raced, debating whether to break the tense silence. She wondered if she should tell him the truth, that Ji Sun-chan, a student who had since transferred, was the one who drew it. A heavy silence hangs in the air. Seo-woo recalls the past, deciding it's best not to say too much. Telling him the truth about the artist would only bring back the worst memories. In her mind, she sees her younger self nervously explaining to Won-hyeok, "A classmate drew this for me in art class." His expression darkens as he looks at the sketch, his voice low. "A classmate, huh?" Sensing the sudden tension, she quickly offered to draw one for him, too. Back in the present, the pen scratches softly against paper. Under the warm glow of a single lamp in the bunker, Seo-woo draws. Won-hyeok watches her and asks what brought this on. She keeps her eyes down, murmuring that she just thought he might like to have a drawing. As Seo-woo continues to draw, she remembers a past conversation. It's good to have something that brings you joy, she thinks, a place to escape. The thought crosses her mind that maybe she should find a hobby too. Won-hyeok watches her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Finally, she turns the sketchbook towards him. "Here," she says softly, her voice hesitant. "What do you think?" He takes it, holding the drawing of his own face in his hands. He calls it a perfect likeness, but his tone is thoughtful. He murmurs that it came out a bit gloomy, and Seo-woo looks up, startled by his unexpected critique. Seo-woo's shoulders slump with disappointment. "Is it really that bad?" she asks softly. "If you don't like it, then never mind." Won-hyeok leans in close, his sudden proximity making her flinch. "That's not what I meant," he clarifies. His hand gently settles over hers on the sketchbook, a warm and unexpected touch. The contact triggers a hazy memory of a gentler time, another soft touch from their shared past. The vision fades, leaving Seo-woo looking exhausted. She murmurs that she's just a little tired and walks towards the couch, telling him she's going to nap. Won-hyeok stands over the table, his gaze fixed on the sketchbook. In the quiet of the bunker, Seo-woo sleeps on the couch, her soft breaths the only sound. He settles on the floor, carefully examining a portrait she drew of herself. His eyes narrow, catching a tiny detail near her ear that he seems to have overlooked until now. "A mole," he murmurs, his expression shifting with a sudden understanding. In a flash, he springs to his feet and dashes away, a new and urgent purpose driving his movements. A sudden revelation stops Won-hyeok cold. He moves with a silent, deliberate pace toward the sleeping Seo-woo, his eyes filled with a new intensity. "It really is there," he breathes, the confirmation a soft whisper in the bunker's stillness. The old couch creaks as he leans over her fragile form. With a surprisingly gentle touch, his finger brushes her hair aside, lightly prodding the skin near her ear. Seo-woo stirs at the contact, murmuring softly as she bats his hand away in her sleep. He pulls back, watching her, a profound understanding settling upon his face. His fingers gently trace the delicate skin behind her ear, confirming the tiny mole he suddenly remembered. A faint, knowing smile plays on his lips as the confirmation settles deep within him. "Found it," he whispers into the silence of the bunker. The present fades, replaced by a memory of a quiet night. A younger Seo-woo, her face framed by glasses, struggles with a lighter that only clicks uselessly. From a railing above, a boy with a patched eye watches her. "Is it not working again?" he asks, offering his own. She looks away, dismissing him coldly. "I'll manage. Get lost." The memory shifts as another boy appears on the stairs, his voice cutting through the night air. He questions Won-hyeok's presence, then looks down at Seo-woo with a sharp gaze. "What? Do you have a thing for her?" he asks Won-hyeok directly. He notes how protective Won-hyeok is at school and warns him to stop. Then, he delivers the crushing blow. She already has a boyfriend. He tells Won-hyeok she's at her boyfriend's place right now, ordering him not to interfere. As the others leave, Won-hyeok remains, defeated. "A boyfriend," he whispers to the empty stairwell. Seo-woo's eyes slowly flutter open. A bit groggy, she glances at her phone, the screen glowing faintly in the dark. 8:02 a.m. A sudden, jarring memory flashes through her mind. A gasp of shock as she tumbles through the rain, Won-hyeok just below her. The image vanishes, bringing her back to the quiet reality of the bunker. She sits up, pulling a blanket around herself, and her gaze lands on Won-hyeok. He sits on the floor, facing away from her, completely still. A wave of confusion washes over her. She wonders, and that's where we'll leave them, for now. If this one hit you right, you already know the move. Tap subscribe. The next obsession drops twice a week, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. I pulled 2 more recaps just for you. They're on your screen right now. Pick your poison. This was Manhwa Dragon. Stay obsessed. I'll see you in the next one.